to get here in time. We go then to the previous meeting minutes. Are there any addendums or comments from colleagues? If I can have a show of hands, all in favour? Against? Abstain and carried. Thank you very much. We go now then to declarations of interest. Any declarations? Excellent. Oh, Councillor Spink.
I'm a member of the CPRE, as I always declare, but I also know slightly Mr. Luke Davis, who is one of the objectors. I have taken advice from the Deputy Monitoring Officer, and I'm satisfied that I'm entitled to sit. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's just to mention that I know Mr. Griffin from Bridlesford Farm, because I'm obviously his local councillor, and also that the owner of the land for the site at Lake, Mr. Franco, is also someone I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Price. Anyone else? Excellent. Councillor Fuller.
Yes, I know Mr. Franco as well. I didn't know whether Mr. Franco was an applicant, an objector, or so, but I do know him because he has contacted me, asked about other things as well. My son also used to work for McDonald's many moons ago. I don't think that's relevant, but I thought, while I've got the mic, I'm just annoying everybody with its speaking. I will just declare those as non-pecuniary interests.
Thank you very much. I think hopefully our feedback issue is under control. Any further declarations? Councillor Price.
Yes. Yes, I confirm that I know Mr. Franco as well.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, also to mention, I don't know if anyone else had this experience over the last couple of days, but I've had a phone call from someone telling me they were representing McDonald's. I don't know if anyone else has had that phone call, but I had a phone call and I immediately told the person on the phone that I was not able to discuss anything at which I would be part of a decision on the planning committee. So, but I think this person probably, there's no influence or anything, but they wanted to talk to me about the application and I made it quite clear that I wouldn't do that. So, and I think other members may have been contacted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller, yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I also had the same person that phoned me up and they said that they were a consultant working for McDonald's and did I have any questions that I wanted to ask them? And I said, this is an inappropriate phone call. And if I have any questions concerning the application, I will be raising those with officers during the hearing and not a third party.
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Yes, I received the same phone call and I responded that I had all the information was contained within the report.
Thank you very much. Anything else from colleagues? In which case we'll move on to public questions. We've received one public question submitted in writing from a Miss V. Turk, directed to myself as Chair of Planning Committee. The question runs as follows. When an RVC application is received under Section 73, is it reasonable to expect that 1, justification will be given for the changes requested, for example, the change of a hotel bedroom to a bathroom or the addition of an extra ground floor door, and 2, internal changes to the function of large rooms to be shown on the updated plans. For example, a lounge being changed to a kitchen breakfast room or inclusion of kitchenettes in rooms assumed to be hotel bedrooms. So the response, which, although the question was directed to me as Chair of Planning, comes essentially from the Planning Authority, is as follows. It is not considered reasonable to expect that such information is provided. There is no requirement for an applicant to explain or justify why they wish to make an application or changes to an application. The local planning authority is determining the merits of the application in relation to policy and material planning considerations, not the reasoning why someone is making an application. the local planning authority cannot control internal alterations to properties, as this is not classified as developments. Section 55, subsection 2A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 states as follows, at paragraph 2, the following operations or uses of land shall not be taken for the purposes of this Act to involve development of the land. A, the carrying out for the maintenance, improvement, or other alteration of any building of works which, at paragraph I, affect only the interior of the building. And I will circulate that to the questioner and to committee members. And that was the only public question we've received. So on that basis, we will proceed forwards to the substantive matter before us, which is agenda item 4, which is our site address for land to the northwest of White Rails Road, west of Park Road, and to the southeast of White Rails Road. This is reference 22/01585/FUL. So if I could invite Mr. Chick to open the presentation on this. Thank you, Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, before I get into the presentation, which I'll just quickly share, should come up in a moment, just draw members' notice to the update paper. That covers some of the sort of straggler comments that came in after the report was provided. In addition, officers can let members know that a third-party objector submitted 3 documents at 12:30 today. So after the update had been submitted to committee services, the officers have read the documents, which include a critical analysis of the officer report and comments on the applicant's sequential test. In the critical analysis refers to issues of flood risk and drainage, fire safety, and other sections of the report that the local person disagrees with. Officers have read the information and consider that the discussion, conclusions, and recommendations within the report are sound, and therefore consider that the current recommendation stands as written. Officers would refer councillors to and other interested parties to the comments of Baroness Hale in R versus Hampshire County Council. This relates to planning officers' reports, and she said planning officers' reports to committee are not to be read with undue rigour, but reasonable benevolence, and bearing in mind that they are written for councillors with local knowledge. So I'll move into the presentation. Get the papers in order. So the application site, which councillors have now been to, is located 100 metres south of Wotton, over here where the red cursor is. Hopefully you can see it as you can. And it comprises several fields to the north and south of White Rails Road. They are part of Bridlesford Lodge Farm. Overall, they amount to 32 hectares. 27.2 hectares of that would be for the proposed solar panels, and obviously they're shown on this plan here. And 5.3 hectares for the proposed battery energy storage system, which I'll call the BESS from now on, so I don't have to keep saying all those words. So access to the site is from the existing gate, just down where the Butterfly World sign is there, opposite to a property called Benham. In the area, it is generally rural, with agricultural fields mainly laid to grass. To the north and northwest of the site is Fatting Park Copse, an area of ancient woodland. Further beyond that is the former railway line, which is now a cycle and walking route. And beyond that is the council's crematorium. To the south of the site, there's an existing Southern Electricity substation. And just off to the west is Butterfly World, which is a garden centre as well. Bridlesford Lodge Farm is at the point of the cursor here, just on the southeast corner of this map, and you can see Wotton there. I thought I'd include this slide just to show the relevant designations to this site. So the site itself isn't the subject of any designations. The bottom west-hand corner to the west is partially within flood zones 2 and 3. Bridlesford Copse SAC is 870 metres to the east. That's a special area of conservation, and that's designated because the broad-leaved woodland supports very good populations of Bechstein bats So they're a protected species, and so that area carries a European designation. The yellow area here is the AONB, or National Landscape, which is 1.2 kilometres to the east. If I do refer to it as the AONB at all tonight, it is the National Landscape. And I've said about flood zones 2 and 3. Moving on then, this slide just shows some existing solar parks in the surrounding area. So over here, this is North Fairley Farm. That's an area that covers 12 hectares of land and can generate up to 7.25 megawatts of power, approved in October 2014. Then the Grange Farm solar panels here to the north of Grange Farm, a nursing home. That covers an area of 18 hectares and can generate 6 megawatts. And again, that was approved in October 14 when we had a lot of solar panel schemes. And then finally, a smaller solar scheme there submitted by Bridlesford Lodge Farm, just to the east of the farm there on the main Bridlesford Road. That covers 1.47 hectares and generates 250 kilowatts per year. Moving to properties that are nearby to the site, we did point these out on the site visit, but it's important to just see them tonight. So Knollwood is this property here with the mock Tudor detailing. That's located just to the east of the application site. Let's get my measurements right. That would be 40 metres, approximately 40 metres from the proposed panels. Then Hillgrove House is located opposite to the house, the site, opposite side of White Rails Road. That is located 30 metres from the area of the proposed panels. Then Benham, which is a former farmhouse related to what is now a business park. That's located 37 metres from the proposed panels in this location here. And Benham is this house shown in the photograph at the bottom of the slide. Also close to the site is Grange Farm. That's located 180 metres away. And then the properties in Park Road, in this location here, so the southern edge of Whitton, their back gardens are located 180 metres from the area of the proposed panels. Moving on to some photographs, I'll whip through these quickly because we did go to site recently. So photographs A, both of these are A. They are taken from the area of the proposed access, and you can see the gates there and the large oak trees close to them. And then a slightly angled view from the same place looking across the site up towards the further fields where proposed panels would be, if approved. Then photograph C is looking towards the site from another section of White Rails Road, looking across to the west. And then photograph D is taken from White Rails Road itself, just looking across the hedge, which since these photographs are taken has grown up, looking into the site. Then looking from the area around Bridlesford Road and Park Road. So photograph A, that is taken from opposite to Hillgrove House, looking across to where the hedges are. Then we move to Park Road and photograph B, looking across the application site. Photograph D is taken from a similar location through a farm gate, looking across the topmost field, which is at the point of the cursor now. And photograph C is taken from the cycle track, which is where we visited on Friday. And you can see there the gap through the northern boundary hedgerow, which has been created by some works by SGN for Gasworks. And then a couple of photographs just showing that the long boundary of the site with White Rails Road. So the first one is looking from opposite where Benham is, looking to the northeast. And then the second is taken from close to Hillgrove House and Knollwood, looking in the opposite direction. Then moving on to the BESS, the Battery Storage Centre. These photographs are mainly taken around Bridlesford Road. So photograph A, taken from Bridlesford Road, looking down towards where the proposed BESS would be quite a distance from Bridlesford Road. Two photographs for B, inside the hedge boundary, just behind Bridlesford Lodge Farm, looking to the area where the proposed battery storage system would be. And this red arrow is just showing exactly where it would be located, and it would be behind the hedge that you can see in the foreground there. And then these photographs are taken from the landscaping where point C is, to the south of the proposed best and close to the woodland here, Blacklands Copse. The red arrow shows where the storage system would be there. And then this is showing it from further back with the hedgerow in front. So moving on to the actual proposals, it's proposed that this site would generate 18.5 megawatts of renewable energy, do so through solar power, similar to other systems on the Isle of Wight. This side elevation view just shows the panels that are proposed. There would be a distance of 7 meters across the plane of these panels here. They'd be 0.9 meters above ground level at the front, and they'd be set at an angle of 15 degrees, meaning that they'd be around 2.7 to 3 meters high at the back. There would be a 3 meter gap between the panels. Most of the panels would be put in on pile-driven supports, so metal supports, which will be pile-driven in the ground, so don't need excavation. Some of the panels close to the gas main that runs close to the site would need to be on concrete pads to protect the gas main. So they would be located in this northern section of the site. And then I've just put some slightly zoomed in plans just to show what's proposed. It's probably best to move quickly on to the other plans which show it a bit more detail. So there are some substations that are proposed. 4 substations proposed. These are where the 3 arrows are pointing towards. There'll be 2 in one location where the arrows are. These would be 3 meters long, 1.5 meters wide and 2.6 meters high. And then there's a proposed what they call a customer container, which the applicant would keep tools in. That would be 6.1 meters long, 2.4 meters wide and 3 meters high. And that would be located down close to the proposed access here. So this plan shows where the proposed access would be. These plans have been revised to move all of the infrastructure in this location away from flood zones 2 and 3, so that nothing is in the flood zone. And the proposed access roads would be these brown areas here. And I'll show you a cross section of those in a moment. The site would be enclosed by 1.8 meter high fencing, so mesh fencing, a little bit like deer fencing, to enclose the site. And these cross sections here show how this would look compared to White Whales Road. And I'll show you some of the proposed landscaping in a moment. But these plans are showing an existing hedge, proposed new scrub planting, and then a temporary, what they call an instant hedge, which would be placed here temporarily and would be laurel, while the scrub planting establishes. It would then be removed in future. And what these slides are showing you is incrementally how the landscaping would grow. And finally, in year 15, showing the laurel hedge removed because it would no longer be required. Also shown on this slide is the proposed CCTV cameras that would include CCTV camera on the top and a motion sensor at about 1.75 meters high up, so 3/4 of the way up. These cross sections show the proposed access tracks of the site. These would be constructed using crushed stone to ensure that they would be permeable. And then this slide here shows a proposed cross section of a proposed drainage ditch that is planned to intercept water crossing the site. And I'll just flick back to the plan which shows where that interception ditch would be. So that would run alongside the site outside of the 25-meter buffer just to intercept water from surface water flows. And the final details of that would be agreed by condition. Then this slide shows proposed landscaping for the site. So you can just see grayed out the panels. So the areas of the proposed panels shown in light green, that would be a wildflower meadow, which should be, again, agreed by condition, given that there's differing ground conditions across the site, so different soil types. There would be a native scrub woodland mix in these yellow areas here. Proposed mixed native hedgerows through the site. The dark lines show the proposed temporary evergreen hedges. And then there would be a proposed buffer as well alongside Hatting Park Copse, and that's been increased 25 metres. Then moving on to the battery storage centre. So this would be set within a compound that would measure 120 metres by 45. That would be enclosed by metal palisade fencing, so not the deer fencing you saw earlier on. It would include 8 groups of 5 containers used for battery storage. You can see that they would vary in size on this plan. So you'd have effectively these 8 U-shaped areas of containers of varying sizes. They would be enclosed in part by acoustic fencing. So you can see here this black line here showing acoustic fencing that would run round the south, east and west sections of the site. That would be 4 metres high, but it wouldn't enclose the northern side of the site. So moving on to how it would look in the landscape here slopes from east to west down towards Palmer's Brook. And what you can see here is the scoping of those containers as they fall across the land. And then at the bottom, you can see a proposed substation. That substation would measure 6 metres high to the ridge of the apex roof. It would have a footprint of 10 by 17 metres. And the perimeter would be landscaped with a belt of scrub and native trees, which is shown on this slide. So you can see the area in yellow here would be the native woodland mix. Then there would be a wildflower meadow, species-rich grassland in this location here. What I didn't show you earlier on, I need to show you, sorry to jump back to another slide, is that the proposed cable routes for the substation to connect the solar panels would be through this location here. So there would be a proposed cable route to connect the solar panels to the battery storage centre. And then there would be a further cable that would go over this same section and then travel up the road and into the existing electricity substation. And then finally, got some slides which just show how the proposed site could look. These always come with a health warning because they are just a sort of an imagined view of how they would look, but using what the proposed plans show. So this is showing the existing site here next to Norwood, looking through the gate, and this is then showing what the proposed landscaping may achieve alongside the panels behind it. And then this is a similar photo rendering, just showing the application site for the main entrance from White Rails Road, opposite to Benham, showing the proposed temporary hedgerow there and the proposed banks of panels. You can see there the panels facing the road. And then again, a similar shot looking from Park Road, so across to the top right-hand side of the site, or the northeast part of the site, just looking across through there at the proposed line of panels behind these oak trees here. So the application, Chairman, is recommended for conditional permission.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. We now move to our public speaking element for this application. In a slight change to the canvassed order of speakers, we're going to start with Mr. Oliver Goodwin, speaking on behalf of Gleisdale Underwood. I could invite Mr. Goodwin to speak. Thank you. Please, yes, thank you.
Yeah, showing red at the moment. But I'm a planning barrister representing 3 groups of objectors here. The Wood and Against Solar Powers, which has a substantial membership, and also Luke Davis and Chloe Underwood, who are sitting next to me and are also speaking. This application has a unsatisfactory track record of being having been incomplete and incorrect, and these matters not having been picked up in the officer's report. So the objectors I represent today judicially reviewed the first decision back in September 2023 on a number of grounds, some of which are problematic in this application report here today. It was successful. The council submitted judgment on the issue of the battery energy storage system. And so work has been undertaken, they've come back. Unfortunately, the arrangements for the battery energy storage system still contain flaws that we highlighted in the judicial review. It's still not good. There is no satisfactory, for example, the fire officers' concerns have not all been addressed still from 2022. And there is no safe containment system for water used in the event of a fire, such that it will go into Palmer's Brook, which leads directly into the Solent SAC. So it will cause great harm in the event of a fire. Continuing on the theme of this application getting it wrong, it next was due to come before committee on the 29th of April without a sequential test for alternative sites in the view of flood risk having been carried out at all. This is now a requirement of the MPPF.
Thank you. I will allow you to very briefly finish that sentence if you wish, but keep it short. Thank you.
We drew this to the officers and members' attention on the day of the committee, and the matter was withdrawn from the committee for that to be assessed. It's still not been done correctly.
Thank you. We turn now to Ms. Chloe Underwood. Ms. Underwood.
As an environmental science student and a local land worker, I urge refusal of this application. It fails key planning policies that have not been adequately addressed in the officer's report, which underestimates the visual impact and harm to the landscape, given the uncertainty of a grid connection that underpins the claimed benefits. Wootton is one of the oldest settlements on the island, which should be enhanced and celebrated. Renaming Fatting Park as Sunny Oaks dismisses the historic significance of the site and impacts the cultural heritage. Despite the site being recorded on the Historic Environment Record, the officer's report makes inaccurate claims about the site's history. This site has remained grassland, wood pasture and woodland since the medieval period. Altering the land use and hydrology degrades these habitats, which contribute significantly to the depletion in wildlife. Management changes of the site will further alter the ecosystem, as features like cattle are replaced with mechanical management, a change known to impact bats, which are also displaced by solar arrays. Fatting Park Copse is functionally linked to Bridlesford Copse as habitat for the rare Beckstein's bat, which is also recorded at Fatting Park Copse. The Forestry Commission strongly recommend a 50-metre buffer to protect this, which has not been included in the design and is dismissed in the officer's report. Bats are not the only species under threat. Ecological surveys are incomplete, which has allowed for an inaccurate baseline. For example, no invertebrate survey was undertaken, and as a result, the officer's report concludes that there were no invertebrates on site. The council ecologist hasn't made a site visit, and the cumulative impacts of the adjacent solar farm remain unexamined, despite concerns being raised by the original lead local flood authority. The application and the officer's report lacks detailed evidence needed for an informed decision. While renewable energy is vital, it cannot come at the cost of depleting healthy ecosystems. And a 40-year period isn't temporary for today's agriculture students. They won't have an opportunity to farm this land. It has been taken from this generation. In 40 years, the current owners of land will be 100 years old, and we will rely on this site to be restored by a future generation that has never known it otherwise. As our topsoil is washed away and our cliffs are eroding, can we afford to entrust land management to developers who submitted such a flawed application? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. We turn now to Mr. Luke Davis. Mr. Davis, thank you.
Thank you all for attending today. My name's Luke. I'm one of the farmers at Great Bridlesford Farm and owner of and forester at the ancient woodland Fatting Park Copse. Today we're making a decision on a design which has not been finalised, and the correct procedure has once again not yet been followed. My concerns about the 3 recent solar farm fires on the island and an incident which regrettably included a fatality on a solar farm on the Isle of Wight have not been addressed. As you've heard, there are considerable flaws and safety issues in the officer's report, and the unachievable conditions will take many hours to address. Fatting Park is already suffering. The forest continues to lose ancient trees due to flooding from Grange Solar Farm next door, which went into administration, costing Thurrock Council. Solar farms with their impermeable surfaces disrupt natural water flow. Instead of being absorbed into the heavy clay ground, rainwater runs off rapidly, overwhelming drainage systems and fragile ecosystems. The problem is particularly bad on culverted flood-sensitive sites like the 500-year-old ancient woodland Fatting Park Copse and like the 700-year-old historic parkland that the ancient woodland is named after, but may soon be renamed to Sunny Oaks. This application clearly threatens to make a bad situation far worse, as the officer's report does not mandate an adequate hydrological model or fire control. My prediction is that RegClean will now tell you that this site is sensitively designed and has satisfied all the consultees. However, Natural England, the Forestry Commission and the EA are clearly not yet satisfied. It's not sensitive to put drainage channels in waterlogged land. It's desperate. We need to see that lessons from the past have been learned, and we cannot allow the same mistakes to be repeated. We need to be honest, warts and all. We have already reached a tipping point where ecological damage to Fassing Park copse is irreversible because you can't replant ancient trees. Fassing Park is a precious resource which is already suffering significant damage from an existing solar farm, which is smaller. We currently have no ability of stopping this damage, so voting to approve this application in its current form might give Biddlesford a lifeline, but it will be and could be a death sentence for the ancient woodlands in the area.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. We turn now to Mr. Paul Griffin on behalf of the applicant. Mr. Griffin, thank you.
Thanks for having me today to speak in support of the application. Biddlesford Lodge Farm is our family farm. It's been home to our herd of pedigree Guernsey cows since 1923. I'm fourth generation and started farming in the early 1990s. Low profitability in the industry has now taken the number of Isle of Wight dairy farms from 60 down to 4 in that time. We're still in business because we've built a milk processing building at considerable financial risk and diversified our business. My family sold Fassing Park copse in 2020 to finance capital investment in our new milking parlour. The development land is the least productive on the farm. Feedstock crops can be grown here, but it's not cost effective. Our winter wheat crop of 39 acres failed this year, and the loss incurred will negate any potential profitability for years to come. Inefficient and unproductive farmland requires the support of taxpayers' money. But unfortunately, agricultural subsidies have moved from production to environmental stewardship, and most recently, nothing at all. My farm, in common with much of UK agriculture, needs support. Sunny Oaks will support Biddlesford by providing 1, job security for over 35 staff members, 2, security to our farming business and our secondary supply chains by reducing our exposure to risk and by extension, improving the sustainability of our herd. Lost feed will be replaced by bone from other farms, another gain for wider Isle of Wight farming. Financial stability will preserve a much loved educational asset used by many local schools and community groups. On the development land, we will stop using agrochemicals, fungicides, pesticides, herbicides, growth regulators and artificial fertilizers to encourage efficient production. This is the reality of agriculture. Our unprofitable land will then become profitable. If the development proceeds, Biddlesford legacy will remain for future generations and will continue to be the much loved community asset that it is. This development will support agriculture on the Isle of Wight and improve the natural environment. It will also generate renewable energy. It will be part of the climate solution that we all need.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We turn then to Mr. Barker, Mr. Richard Barker. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you today on behalf of the applicants. You've just heard how Sunny Oaks would support one of the final few island dairy farms alongside job security, tourism and education, but its benefits will go even further. From reducing reliance on imported fossil fuels, along with those familiar price shocks, to delivering a 169% net gain in biodiversity, Sunny Oaks offers real measurable value. It would also showcase the island's leadership in tackling climate change, something future generations will judge us all on. In June, the Climate Change Committee reported to Parliament that UK emissions have more than halved since 1990. It is of note that this progress was made during the relative infancy of the renewable sector. Today, you have the chance to reapprove a project that builds on that experience and would benefit from the falling costs of renewables to deliver affordable, homegrown, clean energy. The report confirms that shifting from fossil fuels to domestic electricity will lower household bills, boost energy security and keep the UK on track for net zero by 2050. Projects like Sunny Oaks are essential to that transition. A recent National Energy System Operator report also confirmed that a renewable future won't raise bills and will shield communities from further energy price shocks. We work closely with these communities and see the impact firsthand. Energy security is national security and it matters deeply to the residents you represent. Sunny Oaks has undergone rigorous scrutiny twice and received non-objections from Natural England, the Environment Agency, the League Local Flood Authority, County Arborist, Ecologist, Archaeologist, Parish Council, and your own planning officers, all of whom are satisfied subject to planning conditions. The battery energy storage has been designed in consultation with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service, who are satisfied, again, subject to condition. The containerised battery units are remotely monitored with internal fire suppression systems and there's drainage provision to address runoff. This scheme remains materially the same as previously approved. What is materially different today is its even more urgent need. The ability to contribute to energy security in a way which benefits the local environment and communities lies with you this afternoon. I urge you to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. We turn now then to the local councillor, Councillor Sarah Redder. Councillor Redder.
Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Before I begin, I'd like to declare an interest. I am an employee of my family's business, which trades with Bridlesford Lodge Farm, the landowners, for application as both customer and supplier. While I'm not a director, several members of my family are. I speak today solely in my capacity as the elected ward member for Wootton Bridge, here to represent the views of residents. So let me begin on a positive note. The applicant has clearly made meaningful improvements since the previous version of the proposal. The current application provides significantly more detail and responds to earlier concerns raised by consultees and the local community. These include new fire safety measures, drainage and runoff strategies, and enhanced ecological protections. It's also worth reflecting on the broader picture. The Isle of Wight, with its high levels of solar irradiance, is well positioned to play a leading role in the UK's transition to renewable energy. Solar parks, when appropriately designed and sited, can offer considerable benefits, reducing carbon emissions, supporting biodiversity, and helping farming communities diversify at a time of economic uncertainty. Policy E4 of the Island Planning Strategy explicitly supports the diversification of farmland, where farming remains the principal land use, recognising that such diversification is critical for the viability of rural enterprises. Indeed, some residents have welcomed the proposal exactly for these reasons. The National Farmers Union has also expressed strong support, highlighting how renewable energy projects can support both the climate and farming resilience. Local supporters see this not just as an infrastructure project, but as a signal that our island is taking climate responsibility seriously, something that many supporters have expressed as important to them. However, I must also highlight some continuing concerns raised by other residents and consultees. First is drainage and flood risk. Residents living downstream of the site, particularly near Palmer's Brook, have reported frequent flooding events. Since the application last came before the committee, I've had several residents reach out for help due to flooding events in the area. The lead local flood authority has recommended approval, but subject to detailed conditions. These include verification of ditch dimensions, infiltration capacity, and long-term maintenance. It's crucial that these conditions be rigorously enforced to prevent adverse impacts off-site. Second is ecological sensitivity and hydrological impacts. Both remain a significant concern. The site borders Fatting Park Copse, an ancient and semi-natural woodland that forms part of the wider Bridlesford Copse SAC network. It supports a rich assemblage of protected species, including Bechsteins and grey long-eared bats and European eels in nearby watercourses. Natural England has confirmed that the proposed 25-metre buffer between the development and the woodland is an improvement, and provided mitigation is secured, they raise no objection. However, the Forestry Commission has gone further, stating that a minimum 50-metre buffer would be more appropriate. They emphasised that a 15-metre route protection zone, although referenced in national guidance, is a minimum for routes, not a sufficient safeguard against wider impacts. The Forestry Commission has also raised serious concerns around hydrological pressure on Fatting Park Copse, noting that it's already under stress. They advise that any changes in drainage flow, especially from surface water redirection, could cause long-term ecological deterioration. They recommend further site-specific hydrological assessments led by qualified woodland ecologists. This is an especially important point to consider as Fatting Park Copse also already borders another renewable energy park which has had notable impact. These concerns are echoed by the Council's ecology team, who have requested robust ecological working methods, bat and dormouse mitigation, and details of habitat creation measures, including bat boxes and tailored planting to support invertebrate populations. Third is battery storage safety. While Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service do not object, they have requested a planning condition that requires all fire safety details for the BESS to be submitted and approved before construction begins. This includes details for emergency access, water containment and runoff control, particularly relevant given the proximity to Palmer's Brook and residential land. Fire safety is one area where early scrutiny is particularly important, as highlighted by the Fire and Rescue Service. Once planning permission is granted for BESS sites, there are very few fire safety regulations that apply at a later stage. This makes it essential that safety measures are identified and secured now during the planning process to protect both the environment and public safety. Chair, members, thank you for your time. I hope that my comments have fairly represented both the positive steps taken by the applicant and the genuine concerns raised by Wootton residents and the consultees. I trust the committee will approach its decision with the evidence and balance that such a proposal demands, and ensure that if permission is granted, mitigations are not only secured but enforceable and effective. Chair, to avoid any perception of influence on the debate in relation to my declaration of interest, I will now leave the room. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Redrup. That concludes our public speaking section of the application. We're going to pause very briefly whilst our legal officer, Mr. Ben Gard, gives some legal advice that's been requested by Councillor Oliver. We won't have this as a full intermission, but just a brief caesura whilst that is delivered. Thank you. Thank you very much for your indulgence. So we will now turn to the question section for this application. As I've stressed before, I try to keep the questions separate, distinct from the discussion debate section, just to make it a little bit easier for people to follow along at home. So any questions from colleagues? Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. I did ask this question on site. Within the current plan that we're working to, it mentions that we are looking to have 100 megawatt capacity of renewables on the island. Within the planning strategy, we've increased that, and I did ask Mr. Chick on site how close we were to actually hitting that target, because I think there's other issues that we need to bear in mind as well about use of agricultural land and things like that. And it would be quite useful for me to be able to gauge whereabouts we are with respect to the capacity of renewables on the island at this moment of time, please.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Mr. Chick.
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of consented schemes, we've reached around 90 megawatts. Target in the island planning strategy, which is the current development plan, is 100 megawatts. The island planning strategy doesn't refer to actual targets, it just supports renewables. But there is, in the council's climate and environment strategy, it considers that 220 to 300 megawatts would be required for the island to become self-sufficient in renewable energy production.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Fuller, then Councillor
Just a quickie. That policy then does not really conform to what kind of sustainable energy is used. It could be any kind of sustainable energy, be it wind, tidal, or whatever comes along in the next few years. Thank you. Thank you for that, Ross.
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question goes back to the same question I actually asked nearly 2 years ago. I think Councillor Stewart and I are on the same page regarding the buffer zone. It's great to see that it's now 25 metres. And apologies, Mr. Chick, if you explained it in your presentation. My hearing not the best at the minute, a bit blocked up. So if I've missed it, could you explain to me why we aren't able to go for the 50-metre buffer zone as recommended by the Forestry Commission, please?
Thank you. Councillor Jones-Evans, Mr. Chick.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so I'll just bring up a plan, just to remind you, put it from current slide. There you go. So the proposed buffer strip is here. A 25-metre buffer strip has been included. That was proposed by the applicants. Obviously, the Forestry Commission have referred to potential for a 50-metre buffer. They have also said that the council should seek comments from Natural England and the Environment Agency in terms of the impacts on Fatting Park copse. So the Planning Authority has undertaken an HRA, which refers to the buffer as being 25 metres, and Natural England have confirmed that that is acceptable. So from the Planning Authority's point of view, Natural England are the government's lead advisors. They write the policies related to protection of ecology and wildlife and protected trees and woodland, and therefore we consider that 25 metres is sufficient, given that they've supported that.
Supplementary, yes.
Thank you. So would there be, if the some members of the planning committee say, I did want to put a condition forward that we did go for a larger, no, I'm saying I'm going to do that. I was just trying to work it out in my head. Large buffer zone. What impact would that have on the development? Would it impact on viability, for instance?
Yeah, so I'd imagine that anything that removed an area of the solar panels would impact on viability. From our point of view, obviously that scenario hasn't been mapped out because that's not what is proposed. What's proposed is a 25-metre buffer strip.
We essentially lose most of the panels that are on the east, I'm guessing, the west of that map we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones-Evans. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that. That was one of the questions I might have had. It's something which was put into the 50-metre buffer zone, and I'm afraid I will stick with that as usual, was very much something which was in the draft island plan strategy. It was agreed by the scrutiny committee and subsequently full council. The plan inspector have come back and said that the statutory guidance is 15 metres, and that is what has been accepted by government departments. Is it fair to say that Natural England have come back with they are satisfied with 25 metres on the basis of the statutory guidance of 15 metres rather than biological reasons specifically related to biodiversity?
Thank you, Mr. Chick.
Ultimately, they've not objected to the scheme. They've told us that they don't object.
Thank you. Any supplementary? No. Councillor Spink. Councillor Spink.
That's working. Thanks. I just want to clarify one thing. I think the test, correct me if I'm wrong, but the test that we've got to apply as planning committee is that we have to rule out any reasonable concerns, as it were, that there will be harm to designated sites. So it's quite a high test. Do you agree that's set out in the planning guidance?
Mr. Chick.
If it's planning guidance, it's written, it's planning guidance.
If I could ask you to use the, thank you, Councillor Spink.
The precautionary approach is that development is only permitted if there is no reasonable scientific doubt that it will not affect the site's integrity, that is the designated sites. Now, Given that the Forestry Commission has said, and it's reported in your report at paragraph 6.40, for the avoidance of doubt, we wish to make it clear that it's our judgment that deterioration of Fatting Park copse cannot be considered as avoided unless a minimum 50-metre buffer is provided as part of ruling out impacts for the reasons provided in our response on the 8th of April, in addition to the guidance we have provided on this matter. How are we as a planning authority given that statement by the Forestry Commission, how can we rule out the prospect of any harm to that ancient woodland?
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Are you able to speak to that, Mr. Chick?
We can simply listen to the government's lead advisor on these issues, which is Natural England, and they have said there is no harm. We've carried out an HRA, which is the way you consider the precautionary approach, how we test with certainty the impact on designated sites. That HRA concludes that with mitigation, which would be the buffer strip, and also proposed drainage and what would be planted in the buffer strip, that they have no objection. Natural England are very tough when it comes to designated sites, particularly European sites, in terms of knowing what the impacts on that site would be, knowing the impact that mitigation would have on impacts, and then the corollary to that being the conclusion that there is either harm or there isn't. And Natural England have agreed with the council's HRA that there would not be harm, subject to conditions being imposed and then complied with.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Any further questions? Councillor Fuller.
Sorry for coming back again. I'm just making up for the lost time, I think. I refer to page 17, and that is the judicial review that was held. It says that the decision was quashed as it was considered that the information was not provided to councillors in respect of fire risk. Now that there has been a response concerning fire risk, has those concerns been overcome? I'm asking the question because one of the residents who objected had said that they were not confident that those concerns had been overcome, and I would like to know from the officers whether in their professional views whether that was the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Mr. Chick.
Yes, so I mean, in terms of fire risk, the section in the report sets out the measures that have been undertaken to address that issue since the judicial review. That has set out potential actions that could be undertaken as well and secured by condition, which the fire officer has commented on and not raised objection to, subject to the condition being imposed.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. I did see the fire officer's report, but I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Given that this, I think I'm right in saying this is the first battery storage that we would see attached to a solar park on the island. The point that was made about the potential situation where there would be a fire at the battery station, which I would think there would be many measures in place to prevent that happening in the first place, to be quite honest. But if there was and the fire service attended and used huge amounts of water, which I think is pretty unlikely if it's an electrical fire, but if they did use huge amounts of water, where would that water end up was I think the nub of what was brought up. Is there any bunding within the structure that would retain that initially? Is there anything that would help us sort of understand if there were huge amounts of water used, which, like I say, I wouldn't imagine that our fire service would attend an electrical fire with water, but if they did, could that potentially be a risk? And is there something built within this that would prevent that being as heavy risk? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Mr. Chick.
Too many buttons to press. Right, so if I share with you this plan here, this shows that the battery storage area would be hard surfaced. What is proposed is that there are attenuation tanks located at the bottom of the site, and the bottom I mean in terms of topography, there would be a system of pipes and drainage through the site, which would be used to capture any water that was used or foam that was used during a fire event. They would direct all of that wastewater or foam or whatever it is into these attenuation tanks, which would be sealed. And then at the correct point in time, those tanks would then be emptied and whatever's in them would be disposed of at a suitable waste disposal site, rather than soaking into Palmer's Brook, because it is important that the water at the site does not go into Palmer's Brook, because it does feed into the SPA. It also goes past Fatting Park Copse, and obviously the chemicals from a fire event, from the batteries, but also whatever the fire authority uses, could harm those areas. Now, again, that's an issue that's being assessed in the HRA, which Natural England have not objected to, nor the Environment Agency. And there's a recommended condition to finalise the actual size of those tanks and how they would work.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplementary? No. Any additional questions from colleagues? Councillor Gladwin.
Yeah, I was concerned to hear about the flooding in a neighbouring solar power station, and if that's a smaller one to start with, and this is a lot bigger, so I'm just very concerned about that, and I'm also very concerned about the species where they've not done proper surveys on them, and of course I'm worried about the fire aspects, and wildfires have not been mentioned at all. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I perhaps potentially paraphrase the question in the sense that you'd like to ask about those 3 points in general? Are you able to speak to that, Mr. Chick?
Yes, so I mean, in terms of flooding from other sites, I can't comment on how they may have contributed to flooding of Fatting Park Copse. They were approved in 2014. I don't know what exactly they had in terms of the ability to capture any floodwaters, but this site has been designed to catch them. So first, from the battery storage system, which you can see in this slide, I've also explained to you the proposed ditch that would run down the side of the buffer. With the cross section there, it's an indicative cross section, which I will try and find. This is it here on the right hand side of the slide. So this is an indicative ditch. That ditch would be dug and then filled with some sort of quite large aggregate, like a type through gravel, something like that, to provide storage space for water. So that ditch would capture the water if there was a really, serious flood event. And the flood event predicted for this site, I think, has a 1% chance per year. So that would be installed to capture any floodwaters that didn't get intercepted by the ground itself. In terms of species, invertebrates are referred to in the ecology information, and they are referred to in this report. It's just that none were found on the site. But what the proposals include is a range of new habitats proposed throughout the site, which would improve the habitats for species on this site. And the site is farmland, so each field is a monoculture. It is planted with one plant per year, and is very low in terms of ecological grounds. The importance for this site are the hedgerows and the trees, which are retained, apart from 2 ash trees to be removed that have died back, and 1 terminally declining oak tree. I can't really comment on wildfires. I suppose they are events that do happen, but they would be responded to by the fire service as and when needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Supplementary? Not at this time. Anything else from colleagues? If not, we'll move to Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on, if I may please, from the ditch, or whatever one wants to call it, that we've just outlined running alongside the buffer zone. That's, as I understand it, an infiltration ditch. Is that correct? It was originally proposed to be discharge into Palmer's Brook, but then it was realised that there was no connectivity to Palmer's Brook. Has that land been surveyed or assessed to show whether it will infiltrate? Because I had understood, but I may be wrong, that it's mainly clay in that area.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Mr. Chick.
So in this area of the island, it's the Hampstead member, which has a mix of clay, silt and loams, and sand as well. So depending on where you are in the field, there may be different geological makeup to that field. It is quite varied across the Hampstead member. But yes, there are clays. And what that means is that the final actual sort of flooding system for this site in terms of infiltration would be satisfied by condition. So the condition would secure the more sort of intrusive surveys where you're looking at the geology across the site, what the final solution should be in terms of infiltration across the whole site. So obviously when it rains, there's a certain amount of infiltration across the field, and then whatever it isn't infiltrated would be caught by this ditch. That would then hold the water and allow it to dissipate naturally through the buffer and towards Palmer's Brook. But the actual final solution is proposed to be conditioned, and statutory consultees don't object to that approach.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Yes, please. In your report, you've asked for paragraph 6.8. You've asked for further information in which you say clarification was still required as to the length of the intersection ditch, together with volume summary section, and then you've listed as well, the following information was requested to demonstrate the functionality of the ditch, dimensions including length, width and depth, cross sections and long section. As I understand it, the design, if this ditch can't deal with infiltration on the principle of infiltration, and if it can't go into Palmer's Brook, what's going to happen?
Thank you, Councillor Spink. Mr. Chick.
Yes, so, sorry, those comments there are not my comments, they're comments by the Lead Local Flood Authority. What they've said is that further detail will be needed, but they don't object and have confirmed that conditions will be appropriate. So condition 19, I think it's condition 19, is that the number? Yes, so condition 19 relates to the passive infiltration ditch. That sets out the information that would be needed. I can read through it if you like, but I'll leave it to you to read it in Ledger for now. But basically, as I say, the final solution for the drainage system would be conditioned. That should show potential for infiltration across this site, and then that would determine how big the ditch needed to be ultimately, and its makeup, and that should, in Officer's opinion, deal with the issue of runoff from this site, noting that the storm event is 1% chance per year.
Thank you, Mr. Chick. Further questions from colleagues? In which case we'll move to the debate section of the application. Who wishes to kick things off? Everyone reluctant? Councillor Price, followed by Councillor Quirk. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Something I didn't say when we were declaring interest is, I think I probably should mention this, that I did meet with Mr. Davis at one point prior to it coming back to committee with Councillor Redrup, and we walked the site, which gave me a good understanding of his concerns. So I was grateful for that, but I thought the committee should know that. Obviously, I know the area very well. I know all of Newport very well. There, of course, are flood concerns everywhere. To some degree, when it comes to the management of water runoff from any kind of agricultural field, if you put something above it, obviously it's going to change that. But you know, when it comes down to this particular application, it's been through quite a lot of stages. There's been lots of information that's been brought back to us. There's obviously been a lot of work put into understanding the potential flood risks of this site. And to some degree, we're going to have to make a decision based on what the experts are telling us. You know, the experts are telling us that this arrangement can cope at the worst potential rainfall. And so in that respect, I think when it comes to flooding of the site, we're going to have to really accept that without any further evidence to tell us otherwise. But, you know, coming back to the renewable energy issue, you know, I've been on this committee the longest here. Other councillors have come back to the committee, like Councillor Fuller, who've probably been on it overall longer than me. But you know, I'm the longest serving member of this committee, and I've been on here when we've turned down wind turbines. I've been here when we've turned down oil exploration. I was, you know, involved in the decision at the anaerobic digestion plant, which, you know, was a very difficult decision to make. When it comes to solar parks, my view is that they're virtually silent. When they're finished with, they can be completely removed and the land can go back to how it was. All of pretty much everything that's used in a solar park is recyclable in itself. When you come to wind turbines, we all know what happens with the waste from wind turbines. You know, if we are really serious about green energy, then, you know, we should be supporting solar. We are a good producer of solar energy on the island. It shouldn't just go anywhere, I understand that. But, you know, having listened to the farmer and, you know, a fourth generation farmer, you know, one of the very last dairy farmers that we've got on the island, and, you know, listening to the potential risk that this could put that operation under, if this didn't go ahead, is a concern to me. And I think that we have a right and we have a duty to make sure that that is part of our decision process. You know, we've already considered this. It's already been voted and approved. We know why it's come back to us again. I think we were all a little bit confused as to why it came back to us again in some respects. But obviously I'm understanding, you know, the process and the judicial review and a potential another one maybe after a decision's made if it doesn't go the way that the objectors want it to go. You know, I'm very much minded to support this application at this stage. I'm going to listen to the rest of the debate. But, you know, we have sat here previously and we've listened to the loss of farmland for other reasons. And we've sit here and we've voted for that. Now we're potentially faced with voting for the loss of farmland to solar energy, but to save a farm, surely that's the right thing to do, isn't it? It's not going to please everyone. I understand that, but I do feel that understanding the big picture and understanding what makes a successful farm survive for the future, and when we've got very few surviving and they're all diversifying in their own way, if they didn't, they wouldn't simply be here. We've already heard that the crop that Bridlesford tried on this land that failed, you know, what do we ask them to do? Do that again? Put more pesticides into the ground? There's lots of reasons for and against this, but, you know, when it comes down to this particular debate and not going back over old ground that we did previously, but myself taking on the issues that Mr. Davis has raised with this land, which I absolutely respect. You know, is there adequate mitigation for that within this application? I think we have to trust the experts in that respect. I don't think we have any other option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Quirk, then Councillor Jones-Evans. Councillor Quirk.
As a council, we voted to accept that we had a climate crisis and that we were going to support renewable energies and zero carbon and moving in that direction. So the starting point for something like this is that we should be inclined to support it unless there's reasons not to. In terms of sources of renewable energy, I'm not a great one for covering large areas of the country with solar panels, but we also need to look at the viability of the farms. Over the last couple of years, we've been talking about regeneration, and in the Policy and Regen Committee, and the problem is there's no funds within the council for regeneration. We've got a scheme here that is looking at regeneration, that makes a farm sustainable in the long term, produces jobs that we need on the island, produces green energy that we need and want to support. So it all seems to fit together. And then we also have a biosphere and biodiversity we want to encourage. And you take an area of land and you stop putting pesticides onto it that could potentially contaminate the waterways, and you don't put other chemicals onto it. That's going to encourage certainly a lot of the smaller creatures that exist onto a site like this. So I actually am very much minded to support it, and as I did last time, and I don't think I've heard anything that changes my mind on that. The fire service has identified that there are risks, but they are manageable risks, and you have to sort of take a pragmatic approach, and I think the pragmatic approach that I will probably be taking is to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Councillor Jones-Evans, followed by Councillor Spink. Councillor Jones-Evans.
Thank you. As I said earlier, we've been here before, nearly 2 years ago, to discuss this, and I'm really pleased to see that the buffer zone has been increased, as what we wanted 2 years ago, and all the detail regarding the planting, mitigation that will go in, and all of the planting that's going to go into the widened buffer zone as well, will obviously provide habitats and food sources as well for the native species. And I think it's useful that they've gone through in quite a lot of detail impact on any flooding, and that ditch has really helped sort of salve my conscience on that issue as well. So the same amount of rain is going to fall, but obviously it's the impact of the interference of the panels that would direct rain in a certain way, perhaps. So I think this is a good mitigation. As Councillor Price said, we have to take the experts' advice on this. People do this day in, day out, whereas we have to become experts for a day on this, don't we? And take a lot of information on and try and balance it all. And as Councillor Quirk said, and balance the risks out as well. I was actually going to second Councillor Price. I guess you were putting the proposal forward, were you, Councillor Price, to... Okay, all right then. Well, if you haven't, then I will. I'll put forward a proposal that we go with the office recommendations on this. And no, from me, there's no further conditions from me. As all, you'll be pleased to hear.
Thank you, Councillor Joseph. I imagine that will be seconded by Councillor Fuller. Yes, we still have okay.
No, I just wanted to make a statement. That was all.
I'll come back to you. I have Councillor Spink, then Councillor Stewart, then Councillor Brody. You have seconded it. Thank you, Councillor Brody. We will, if that's okay, to the proposer and second, just have a continuation of the debate for a little bit longer. I appreciate the constitutional rules would suggest we go straight to the vote, but I think it's worth canvassing and ventilating this a bit further first, but within reasonable limits. So, Councillor Spink, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think everyone, I imagine, on this committee supports solar development. Whether it's the best form of renewable energy is debatable, but clearly I think everyone supports renewable energy. The problem, as I see it, is that frankly you couldn't make up, in my opinion, a worse location to put. I think this will be the largest solar farm on the island. I'll be corrected if I'm wrong in that, but I think so. And the only one, I think, on the island, again, I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, to have battery storage. The battery storage is huge if you look at the scale of it, absolutely huge. And you cannot rule out the possibility of an uncontrollable fire. That's the position. The fire officer's statement says that if as it were, this is my paraphrasing, if the fire has got hold, and it normally would do with a huge battery storage, it may have to have a controlled burn. Now, firstly, there are a number of houses just meters away from that. I wouldn't want to live in a house next to a battery storage. I think the nearest is about 40 meters, which might have to have an uncontrolled burn. Secondly, the effect of this on the oldest woodland, the ancient woodland, and it's set out in the report. I think it's the comments of the Forestry Commission. The report says it's the woodland is the latest and oldest working coppiced woodland on the Isle of Wight. Due to its history, the woodland has over 190 native species, 55 of which are ancient woodland indicator species. And if you'll bear with me, this combined with its wider connectivity with valuable habitats, including other ancient woodland sites, including Lushington Copse and Quarrels Copse, makes it an important habitat for the council to consider prioritising its protection, etc. Etc. is I'm not going to read it all, but that's my comment. Now, the Forestry Commission tells us that we can't rule out the possibility with only a 25 metre of harm to the ancient woodland. And the NPPF tells us that unless we can be sure that beyond reasonable scientific doubt, that there will not be harm, we should not grant it. It's not like an ordinary planning situation where you have to weigh up the balances. You still have to weigh up the balances, but with that in mind. So I shall be, as it won't come as a great surprise, voting against this. The other thing I'd like to raise, if I may please, and again, I'll be corrected, invited if I've got this wrong, but the access on the onto the main road in a westerly direction requires a visibility splay of 170 meters. It can only produce a visibility splay of 100 meters. Now, that's quite a busy road, and the justification for it, for us saying, well, that doesn't matter, is that there's a traffic assessment that says that the solar farm won't increase the number of vehicles coming out of that road, because a solar farm and a farm are fairly similar, as it were. So that's a point, and you can take that, we can take that into consideration, but it does seem to me that we are entitled, and I've looked this up and there's authority to say that we're entitled to form our own opinion about that. Now, if this committee votes for a reduced visibility splay by nearly 50%, and there's an accident, that may result, I don't know, in liability on our behalf, but certainly an ethical liability. What is the justification? Different people will go to that site, and we're going to allow them to use that junction. The fact that it's an old entrance, and therefore we can't control it without development, is irrelevant. So I'd ask you please to consider that. It does seem to me that we're trying to push, as it were, a square peg into a round hole here, that for the interest, and it's somewhat ironic that in the interest of climate change, we're risking a damage to the oldest working coppice on the Isle of Wight. I shall be voting against this because I don't want to take that risk. And it can't be the only greenfield site, let alone brownfield sites. It can't be the only greenfield site on which this could take place. No analysis has been carried out of other greenfield development. And that's a fact. So I would ask you, please, the other thing to consider, finally, is this, that we're often told that if we don't grant something, there might be an appeal. Well, it looks to me, if we do grant this, there'll be another judicial review. In my view, that's likely to succeed, and that'll cost the council a fortune. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spink. We now have Councillor Stewart, followed by Councillor Brodie. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. I came into this with a very open mind and wanted to listen to a lot of comments from my colleagues and from the objectors and supporters. And the first thing I would say is that it has been extremely illuminating and very helpful, specifically Councillor Price's interventions. I'm very grateful for all of those. And it's quite clear that the developers have put a lot of extra work into this, as clearly have the planning officers. So I think that we are safely at a position where we can actually start really thinking about what we want to do. In my view, there is absolutely no reason why we cannot have a 50-metre buffer zone. At a quick analysis, I would reckon that the reduction in photovoltaic area is probably less than 10%. I see the Forestry Commission statements. They're the statements that I've made personally with my background. So obviously I'm more likely to support those. However, I see nothing within what we have as evidence to show that those issues have been properly overcome. We come down obviously to the use of the land. This is the site we're looking at, and I think it's entirely appropriate for agricultural biodiversity, diversification, and importantly for energy security. So I think that there is a very strong justification for having this particular site and solar park. However, on balance, I still have to come back down to I cannot support it with this current buffer zone. It should be 50 metres. There is no reason why it shouldn't be 50 metres. That is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Brodie, followed by Councillor Fuller. Councillor Brodie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I mean, my main intention was to second Councillor Jones-Evans's proposal. I'm not going to say a great deal here. I think Councillor Price articulated much of what I think, and we have discussed this in the past largely and taken a view. I would make only one comment, and it's quite interesting, given some of the members of this committee who have been extremely passionate about the defence of a dairy farm in the past, a fairly notorious planning application that affected this council 4 years ago. And here we have an opportunity here to save a dairy farm, and the same councillors are now speaking against this application. And I find that quite ironic, if not hypocritical. I will be supporting this application. I am a Newport councillor. I live in the electoral ward covered by this. I have walked in Fatting Park Copse on numerous occasions. I know this area well. There are solar farms all over this area between Fairley Road and White Rails Road, and I see no problem with this one whatsoever. If we are going to start addressing climate change, etc., we have got to start as a committee listening to people who are giving us expert advice and starting to drive forward as much as possible in terms of delivery of solar and delivery of wind and delivery of tidal. So therefore, I urge every member of this committee who is not exhibiting signs of hypocrisy to support this application. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. We have Councillor Fuller, followed by Councillor Price and Andre. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. You know, reading through the report, you know, I was quite surprised. You know, we haven't got an objection from Natural England. There is no objection there. So again, if we're trying to safeguard and protect Fattingford copse, you would expect Natural England to actually raise comments. I think the same applies to the buffer zone policy. I would be quite supportive of the buffer zone policy if it was endorsed by Natural England. It's not. We don't even have an objection to this application from this Campaign for the Protection of Rural England. What is of concern to me is that our farming community are the custodians of our countryside. We have to make our countryside work. We have to support their ability to diversify. And this is an opportunity where the Griffin family are doing precisely that. I'm also quite satisfied that Wootton Parish Council also made objections to this application, and those objections have now been overcome, and they're quite happy to support the application. The judicial review comments, they've been looked at, they've been digested, and they have been assessed, and they have caused no concern to officers. My view is that we cannot justify a refusal for this application, so I'm very happy to be supporting the application as stands in line with officers' recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Price, followed by Councillor Andre. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to come back on a couple of points, there was a reference made to the battery storage being an issue. But I think we should be looking at battery storage as a positive. Whether we like it or not, it's coming, and it's going to be all over the country if solar parks are going to continue, because you can't produce energy and let it go straight to waste. If you can store it, you can use it when the sun isn't shining, and that is just a simple fact. The farm vehicles, I've got knowledge of the history of a solar park on Fairley Road that was put in at the beginning of me being a councillor, and the residents that live opposite that site, who no longer live there, I must tell you, but the residents that lived opposite that site told me that when that land changed from farmland to a solar park, they barely ever saw another vehicle go in or out. There were certainly no large trailers trying to turn right onto Fairley Road and causing accidents. And I would hazard a guess that this site will probably no longer have any large tractors and trailers pulling in and out of the site after construction. And that, if there is a concern with the construction phase, we could probably put something in the conditions now to make sure that that is controlled in the appropriate way. It's already done by the looks of it. So, but, and our highways officer can probably add to that if necessary. The other thing, with regards to the buffer zone, I'd noticed that if you could put the picture back up, Russell, and show the buffer zone, I thought it's quite important to point something out. I think we'd all like to see 50 metres buffer zone, because clearly, there's a desire there for that. But we are a bit hamstrung by what's already in place and who's telling us we can or can't have. But if you look along the boundary of the site, would I be right in saying that probably only 50% of that boundary is 25 metres away from the copse? Would I be right in saying that? Whereas the rest of it is probably 50 metres away anyway? Do you get what I mean? Where the solar panels there, where your cursor is, and the ones there, they are 25 metres away. The rest of the site is probably at least 50 metres away. So it's probably only 50% of the boundary that is 25 metres away. Does that make sense? I don't know if, I'm just pointing out what I said.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. I will try not to repeat what colleagues have said, but it's always quite difficult when you're one of the last speakers. We've heard a lot today about balance, but especially about risk. It's not an interest as such, but I will declare that in July of 22, I had solar panels fitted on my roof. I have a battery which is installed in my loft. I have not once had any concerns about fire. I do appreciate that my little 4 kilowatt system does not compare to an 18.5 megawatt system, but I do believe the principles are the same. Councillor Price touched on it. I would go even further. It's well known that we do not have the capacity on the island to export the amount of solar that we actually produce. It's absolutely essential that we have battery storage. The difference that it has made to my own domestic situation, just having, I've got an 8.2 kilowatt battery, it's made such a difference. If I know friends and colleagues that have systems without batteries, and it's good, but a battery takes it into a different league. I also back onto a park where there are bats. I still see bats. I don't see the bats. I know this is just somewhat anecdotal, but I don't see the bats avoiding my roof. They actually fly over my garden. So on balance, I think the positives of this, the mitigations that have been put in, I am satisfied that I can support this application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Andre. We have then a motion that's been proposed by Councillor Jones-Evans, seconded by Councillor Brodie. So we will move to the vote unless anybody desperately wishes to speak. We will move to the vote. All those in favour of approving this application?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Thank you. And against?
1, 2, 3.
And abstentions?
1, 2.
Thank you very much. That concludes this application matter. We will take a 10-minute break, so we will reconvene at 25 to 6. Thank you. Right, well, I will call us back to order now for the hearing of application reference 25/00587/FUL. This is land adjacent to Merry Gardens Public House, Newport Road, Lake. I will invite Ms. Wilkinson to commence the presentation. Ms. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. The application site is an area of 0.39 hectares, as shown by the red line plan at the point of the cursor. There is an area of blue land to the rear of the site, which is not part of the application boundary. I wanted to highlight this now because shall I move away? I'm quite loud, so it may be me. So apologies. I've heard this because when we were on site on Friday, we stood at the rear of the site and looked across, and some questions were asked in terms of what that parcel of land was and what it formed. I thought it was important to share this image right at the beginning because we identified kind of where the edge of Morrison's food store was, which was up here. So we were stood there and then we saw the kind of the KFC in here and we looked across. So the land we were looking over doesn't form part of that blue line. It's a relatively small area to the rear. I wanted to make sure that was clear because I think on site it probably appeared as if the land was much larger. So I wanted to make that clear. So thank you. But the area of the application site is the red area within that plan. That can be seen in this Google Earth image here. We were there on Friday. It's currently used for car sales and car washing. There was also a burger van there. We saw various different activities going on. I will briefly run through some photographs because we all saw that. In essence, the site is located on the, I'll go back one, actually, apologies. It's located on the northern side of Newport Road. Councillors, you will know the site well in terms of its location, no doubt, but just for locational purposes, the cursor is at Morrison's and you have the Merry Gardens Public House at the point of the cursor now, Aldi opposite, with then the Premier Inn and the KFC drive-through in the area of the cursor here, just for locational reasons. I will briefly go through some photographs. We've got some across the site of the car sales and then one looking up and one looking down the road. We've got then a couple looking at along the two boundaries of the site, one along the boundary inside the neighbouring property's fence line. The report discusses that neighbouring property on a number of occasions. We did highlight it on site, thought it was also important to highlight that within the presentation. And then you've got the other boundary on the other side of the site. You've also got the Merry Gardens Public House, which the thatched element of that site, the public house is here at the cursor. The house adjacent to it is listed, that's referenced in the report, and then you have a building to the front which has an association with it in terms of that listing. Moving through the application details, the application does seek consent for a McDonald's restaurant drive-through. The restaurant would have around 50 covers, with this showing that red line boundary again. What it also identifies, but I will go on to a slightly more detailed plan with some colour, but you have an access at this point into the application site, so an entrance and exit point here. And then at the other boundary of the site, you have an entrance point which would access that blue land at the rear. Slightly easier probably to see on this plan where you've got the actual restaurant building itself in the dark green, an area of patio seating at the point of the cursor. That is again referenced in the report in respect to the relationship with the neighbouring property. And then the proposed circulatory system in relation to the drive-through, as well as parking for the restaurant area. The system for the drive-through would come round through here and then out through here, in essence, around the edge of that building. Some elevations of the building as proposed. It would be single story, a combination of cladding with timber and of a dark grey. Then a floor plan and a roof plan for note. I've now put a selection of images in that were requested at the site visit in relation to the proximity of the proposed development to nearby schools and areas to which children congregate, in essence. The reason for this is in relation to reason for refusal 1 of the application, which references paragraph 97 of the NPPF. I will just read to you paragraph, or in brief elements of it anyway, 7.3 of the officer report, which references paragraph 97, which sets out that local planning authorities should refuse applications for hot food takeaways and fast food outlets where A, within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate, unless they are in a designated town centre. You will note that the first reason for refusal, I'd firstly draw members' attention to those reasons because there is a error on the page, so it's page 139 of your report. There is a typographical error where for some reason the first reason for refusal doesn't appear with a number and it is not indented. So apologies, that should, the first element under reason for refusal heading should be number 1. You then have number 2, 3 and 4. You will note that the first reason for refusal references that paragraph 97 referenced in terms of the proximity to schools. You'll also note reference to the sequential test and the proximity from the town centre. The site is not in the town centre and therefore it should be refused if it is not, if it is within walking distance of a school. In terms of the sequential test, this is required as a drive-through use is classified in the NPPF as a town centre use. So when looking at town centre uses, they need to be sequentially considered, where you first look at town centre, you then look at edge of centre, you then look at out of centre. Although the application was supported by a sequential test, it was considered to be inadequate because it did not consider a broad enough scope of area. It did not consider Shanklin, but advice from the officers was that they needed to consider the whole Bay area. Moving back to the slides in front of you, councillors, you will see the location on that. Hopefully you can see that in this area here, just alongside the pin. You then have as a red dot the closest school to which is referred to within the report. This is a primary school and this is considered to be within walking distance from the site. As we've previously discussed in terms of proximity to bus stops, we look at it generally that 800 metres is a reasonable walking distance. Certainly this is considered to be a reasonable walking distance from the school. I've then incorporated 2 other slides which show the other community facilities that are referenced within the report and schools. So if you could bear with me, we have the Bay Academy School at the point here, which is the secondary school. Again, the application site is where the pin is. You then have the football club, sorry, the rugby club. Is it rugby club or rugby club? My apologies. The rugby club is in here, this red dot. You then, in this plan, you've got to the south of the site rather than to the north of the site. You have another school here, Gaston Lake, and you have the football club. Those are all referenced in the report in relation to proximity of them to the site. Apologies if I just correct my dots. So I apologise. This is a junior football pitch. This is the rugby club at the point of the cursor. So my apologies. My green spaces got confused. Councils will note there are also 3 other reasons for refusal. One relating to the lack of an air quality assessment. You will note this is referenced within the appropriate section of the report in relation to air quality. In essence, Environmental Health have confirmed that when you are looking at air quality, an air quality assessment is required when you are looking at more than a particular number of transport movements to and from an access. In relation to this application, it exceeds that number. So in essence, it's set out in paragraph 7.56 of the report. I'm not going to read it out, But ultimately, officers consider, with the advice of environmental health, that because of the number of vehicles using the access, together with the likelihood of those vehicles standing, because they'd be waiting with their engines running, there would need to be an air quality assessment in relation to this application to ensure there would not be an impact on neighbouring residential properties or the area in general. You will also note that there's a reason for refusal in relation to insufficient information on archaeological assets. That is also discussed in the report, and effectively the heritage statement that has been submitted is not considered to meet the standards set out within the guidance for Historic England's desk-based assessments, because it does not describe the archaeological potential of the site, where, according to the HRA, there is some based on finds in the vicinity of the site. There is a final reason for refusal in relation to biodiversity net gain. In terms of that relates to the lack of a legal agreement to secure the mitigation. So it is only right to advise members that should members be minded to approve this application tonight, officers would advise very strongly that any recommendation of such was supported by a subject to a legal agreement to secure the biodiversity net gain. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. We turn then to the public speaking element of this application. In a slight change to the canvassed order, Mr Dixon is not going to be speaking, so in my discretion I have allowed Mr Benjamin Fox and Mr Councillor Whittaker, I should say, to have an additional minute to represent. So if I could invite Mr Councillor Whittaker, I beg your pardon, Ms Smith. Yeah. That's extra minutes. Councillor Whittaker, thank you.
Good evening. I've listened to this be discussed in Lake Parish Council. I've listened to some of your comments opening up from your planning officers. The actual site where McDonald's is going to be placed on has been contentious for quite a few years. We've had illegal containers, tyres, car sales, car washes. None of them have got permission, as the committee probably knows. There's also what has failed to be mentioned. There's already an existing burger bar on site that is open Monday to Friday and on weekends. Again, I believe that has not got the proper permits and it should not be there, but that has been operating for the last 5 or 6 years. From a parish council point of view, we would fully support the McDonald's coming to that part of Lake, as this has been set out as well in the island plan. It was designated as a leisure and tourism site, which McDonald's drive-through fits in. A few hundred yards down the road, we've already got a KFC, which is nearer to the school. I know there has been some change in guidelines. The archaeological finds has probably been destroyed with the significant earthworks that was at the back of KFC and on the car lot sites that was work stop notices were placed on. There is an archaeological site alongside Broadleys School, which is an ancient flint site, but that is way, way, way far away from the site. I sat here that there was reference to made to Gatton Lake School. Across from Gatton Lake School, there's a holiday camp. They've just had a new restaurant takeaway burger and pizza place installed, which will be nearer than their proposed McDonald's from Gatton Lake. The football club, again, is in a stone's distance from a refurbished holiday park down the fairway. So I can't see, I take your point as a committee, but I can't see how a McDonald's is going to have a negative impact on the area at all. From the parish council point of view, there is no objections. I'm glad to see there is 2 car charging ports being installed on site that is desperately needed in Lake. and I just hope you give this the merit is worth considering. The Bay Area Place Plan. This would fit in with the new Bay Area Place Plan. It's about regeneration, tourism, and bringing people into the Bay Area. I have made some notes here that I wasn't in what I had rehearsed in my mind. Drive-through, it backs out onto the road. If there was another McDonald's drive-through, that could alleviate some of the traffic problems in Ryde, because it will be shared across 2 sites. And I just hope the planning committee looks favourably upon this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitaker. We turn then to Mr. Benjamin Fox. Mr. Fox.
Thank you. The site is located on an area of underutilised land, but is surrounded by a range of commercial, retail, food and leisure outlets, and a new McDonald's in this location would be entirely in keeping with the site's immediate context. Our vision is to transform the site to bring economic benefits, and we are proposing to significantly improve the landscaping and biodiversity of the site, which we are more than happy to secure as part of a Section 106. McDonald's recognises the importance of public health and are helping customers make more balanced choices. McDonald's was the first restaurant to display nutritional information on menu boards over 30 years ago, and today 57% of the menu is classed as non-HFSS, and 90% of food and drink menu items are under 500 calories. While school proximity is a material consideration, this is within the overall planning balance. This needs to consider the site in its wider context. The only school within 400-metre walking distance of the site does not usually allow children to leave unaccompanied. If they're walking to and from home, as you saw on the map, they would be going in the other direction. Additionally, there are a range of existing food operators within the vicinity, some closer to the school, and as outlined, there's a burger van already on the site. So behavioural patterns are unlikely to change. The long-term underutilised site is untidy and continues to be an ideal location for the McDonald's restaurant, which will fit in with the commercial setting and enhance the site for the future. Neither archaeology or air quality were raised within the pre-app, and unfortunately, despite offering, we have not been allowed to provide additional information on these points. However, we are confident these could be addressed either now or via condition. The traffic generated by the McDonald's on the site constitutes a high level of joint and link trips. We would not compromise the air quality of the surrounding area. Moreover, no sites have been presented by officers for additional consideration for the sequential test. Given the locational requirements for a drive-through restaurant, we are confident that there are no better sites within the wider Bay Area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fox. We turn then to Mr. Steve Smith. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, hello. My name's Steve Smith. I'm the local franchisee of the existing 2 Isle of Wight restaurants. I've been involved in some capacity or other with these restaurants since relocation to the Isle of Wight in 1994. So I've been working on and off the island with McDonald's for these 31 years and brought up my family here with my island-born wife. Because of the brand presence on the island, I've been able to leverage countless local community projects during this time. These have ranged from sponsoring football clubs, embedding business projects into the island secondary schools, supporting Young Chamber, countless litter picks and events, co-founding Newport Business Association, to name but a few. I was also a founding governor for the Island Free School in Ventnor, and I'm currently now a director and trust member there. I'm part of the fabric of the Isle of Wight, and this has only been possible through McDonald's. On the island, I currently employ over 260 people, and over the years, this has created many opportunities for them to craft a very well-respected career. My current business manager in Newport, Isle of Wight-born Chelsea, started as a 17-year-old crew member. She's now running one of my busiest restaurants, and I'm now sponsoring her to complete a business degree, which she is on track to get first-class honours in. This is one of many examples that I could give you about how we feed back into our people. Having another restaurant in Lake will serve the community more than imagine. Aside from the community projects, which we will be able to leverage from having a site there, we will employ at least 120 people, full and part-time, with as many guaranteed hour contracts as needed. Lake needs this. And the reason I know is because I live 5 minutes walk from the site and have done so for over 20 years. I am part of the community of Lake and will use all the possible resources to ensure this part of the island continues to grow, thrive and become prosperous, something that I would be unable to do if you refuse planning today. In my opinion, very few, if any, children walk past this site on the way to school. The handful that do walk past other retailers, but under their parents' supervision, so there will be no congregation of kids akin to a secondary school. Too many parts of the island are falling into rack and ruin, and it's not often that good quality jobs are created through the significant investment that we can offer, especially in the Bay Area. Alongside this, business rates would be generated, which are also equally desperately needed. I therefore urge you to consider approval if you have the best interests of Lake, the Isle of Wight and its community at heart.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. We now turn to Councillor Paul Brading. Councillor Brading.
Thank you, Chairman. Fellow councillors, this is the first time in 8 years as the councillor I felt the need to address this committee. I've always trusted the judgment of officers who follow rules and guidelines, but rules in this case make absolutely no sense, and the reasons for refusal are simply ridiculous. I'm here wearing 4 hats, really. I'm the ward councillor. I am chair of Lake Parish Council, vice chair of governors at Broadleaf School, which is pivotal to this application. I'm also on the committee of the Residents Association across the road of the big housing estate. The site of the proposed restaurant is a large site currently used by several small businesses. A perfect site for this restaurant. It's between a refurbished Morrison's supermarket, Merry Gardens Public House, the same side of the road as a new Premier Inn, and a relative new KFC, which is much closer to the school than this proposed development. Across the road sits the largest business park in the whole Bay Area, which has also had its own food outlets, an Aldi supermarket. Business in this whole area is really growing and is a massive part of the regeneration of the whole Bay Area, which is well overdue. McDonald's is a major economic player in the south of England, now looking to expand its presence on the island. We should welcome and embrace this. They already employ, as you've heard, 260 people. The Lake Restaurants proposed for 120 new jobs, full part-time positions. Many of the posts will be for our young people, type of jobs that we so badly need, with a clear path to management. This will be a massive part of Bay regeneration. As a company, McDonald's always put people at the heart of their business. They pay above minimum wages. They're highly rated as a graduate and working mums employer and invest so heavily in training. Additionally, they have a sound reputation for management trainee program. Something I saw firsthand when I was a bank manager. One of my young customers got a job in McDonald's, worked their way right up, and now is a regional manager within the company. So they do deliver what they promised to deliver. I've carried out my own research amongst residents, spoke to lots of people. So I'm really commenting on behalf of not only myself, but them. Primary school at Broadleaf, the nearest school, have absolutely no objections to this whatsoever. The presence of KFC had no impact at all on the dietary of their pupils. We have a safe walking to school policy at the school. Years 4, 5 and 6 can, with permission, leave school on their own to walk home. They go the other way. They come out to school and turn left. They do not walk anywhere near KFC or McDonald's. Most, in fact, just walk to the school gates and are met there. So there's absolutely, the public health concerns are ridiculous and unfounded. It's not the case. The supermarkets and a sweet shop just down the road if they want to buy sweets on their way home. I've also spoken to the CEO of Casper Douglas, who run the business park. They're very much in favour of this. I think it's brilliant. It's a big growing business park and they welcome it. Parish Council, you heard from Councillor Whittaker, Parish Council thinks great. This would help the youth of the area that we represent. Merry Gardens Residents Committee that I sit on, they raised three comments. They're in favour of it. They raised comments regarding litter, road access and neon lighting. Talking to McDonald's, they have a fantastic litter policy. 3 sweeps, 150 metres, 3 times a day. They not only pick up their litter, but other people's litter as well. I've also had a discussion with them about community projects of litter picking, because Lake hasn't got litter picking committee like the Green Towns. The litter picking and other projects to the community will kick off massively with McDonald's support, sponsoring other things for us. Regards to concerns about road access and neon lighting, There's a really good report with conditions from Island Roads who've accepted this, and I'm grateful for that. There's some sensible conditions Island Roads have put on this, and then neon lighting will not be visible. So all those conditions, concerns for the association houses nearby are concerned. In summary, as I said at the outset, I don't make a habit of challenging planning consents. I never do. I respect officers, but this is just simply ridiculous and incomprehensible. There are so many food outlets in the area by way of supermarkets, corner shops, KFC, which is much, much closer. Whole Bay Area is a commercial area, can contain the largest business park across the road. No one's objected to this, not one single objection. From all the comments online have objected to this. Island Roads did a great report with conditions, with acceptable conditions, and that's really good. The school have absolutely no reason to object to this. I was at a meeting last night. The school are totally in favour of this happening, because it will not affect them one bit. It's a primary school. The children do not leave during the day. Restaurant will be so much opportunity for employment in the area, both full and part-time roles. Huge benefits to the young people of the Bay and the single mothers, single parents. This really does fit massively in the Bay regeneration improvements. Huge benefits. So the refusal reasons. Number one, the site's bring walking distance to the school. Of course it is. But the school don't object. Kids will walk the other way. They won't go anywhere near this restaurant. You go past the restaurant near the airport. So kids do not walk past this restaurant. Regarding 2, 3 and 4, air quality assessment, traffic will in fact be less, because this area is used by so many businesses, bitty businesses. It will not, and the road itself, as in the report, is a safe road. The traffic accidents are very minimal. Regarding archaeological assets, there is an ancient flint site along the footpath at the bottom of the school field, leading towards the airfield. That's come up in a previous planning application for a bungalow. It's nowhere near this. And if I just finish, can I just urge councillors, please, this is about helping, not stopping regeneration in the Bay. So please, can you do the right thing and approve this application for all the reasons given, and you've heard from others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bading, and apologies for the feedback you were receiving. I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to say that you felt unable to say. I would give you a slight amount of discretion to do so, but very briefly.
And I was just going to really say that, the reasons for refusal are just clutching at straws. This is so much benefit for the Bay and shouldn't be overlooked or stopped. Thank you.
Thank you. We move then to the question part of this application. We have, I don't know whether Councillor Jones-Evans, I think you mentioned that you might want to declare an interest. I'll invite you to do that.
Yes, apologies. It was partway through the last item that I recognised Mr. Smith at the back there. Do apologise. I'm Vice Chair of Newport Business Association. I did indeed set up the business association together, and McDonald's, although you think of them as a big national international company, they are actually a small business, and they are members still and represented by the young lady that Smith talked about. So in short, I'm going to declare a non-pecuniary interest in this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quirk.
I think part of the problem is planners have to go through a process and they have to tick certain boxes, and sometimes the boxes are wrong. And anyone who knows Lake knows that the centre of Lake is actually Merry Garden. It isn't the old High Street. It hasn't been for years. I've lived on the island for over 20 years, and in the last 20 years, the old Lake High Street has never been the centre of Lake. The focus has always been around the Merry Garden. If you want to go and have a pint in Lake, you've got to go to the Merry Garden, not to the High Street. You want to go and have a cup of tea in Lake, you've got to go to the Merry Garden, not the High Street. You want to go shopping in Lake, well, they have actually reopened the convenience store now, but until recently, there wasn't even a convenience store in the High Street. You had to go where you've got the two big supermarkets around Merry Garden. Merry Garden is the centre of Lake, and it's the focus of Lake, and I think it should be recognised as that. And if you do accept that that is the focus, so my question is, why are we choosing the historic centre that's probably 50 years out of date rather than the real centre.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. I guess bound up in that is also the issue of the sequential test. So I don't know if that's something I could refer to Ms Wilkinson to answer as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. In essence, we're applying planning policy is probably the simple answer to that. The sequential test doesn't simply require you to look at the immediate town centre within which the application is situated. So for some new residential developments, we may say that actually the island should be the sequential test assessment area because it would draw from everywhere. For other developments, we'll look at a smaller area for sequential assessment, depending on whether there are those existing facilities elsewhere. But when looking at this site, it was because the application is a town centre use and the town centre boundaries are set within the core strategy. However commercial the Merry Gardens area is, it is not a town centre. It does not have a town centre boundary. So by applying the policy that requires you to look at town centre boundaries first, then edge of centre, then out of centre in a kind of concentric circles in essence, we advised that a sequential assessment needed to look at the Bay area. So it needed to look at Lake Sandown and Shanklin as those centres to which the development should be located first. Thank you, Tim.
Can I have a supplement?
You can.
Realistically, that's again box ticking and unnecessary box ticking. There's nowhere in Shanklin that you could put a drive through. There's not really anywhere in Sandown you can put a drive through. We're box ticking here. Lake is the place that you need to do it. And in terms of how you define the lake centre, from the high street to the Merry Garden is only a short walk. So I just think we're being pedantic here, and it doesn't seem to be a sensible justification, and that's why your rule about the school clicks in.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to the biodiversity net gain, on page 132, the paragraph 7.65 that talks about that, it looks like there's actually quite a good biodiversity net gain, and the problem is that there's no legal agreement as such at this point. Is that correct? If I can just make a comment, I mean, obviously looking at the site, it's a brownfield site, it's pretty much just gravel, isn't it? So I mean, anything's got to be an improvement, hasn't it, when it comes to biodiversity net gain? And I should imagine that most of the gain, am I right in saying, would be all the perimeter planting and the other planting throughout the site? Is that where we would be getting that calculation from?
Ms Wilkinson.
Well, thank you, Chairman. In essence, yes. I think what it's, I suppose I would highlight is paragraph 7.66, where officers do place a positive benefit to the biodiversity net gain. And so the reason for refusal solely relates to the fact that we wouldn't require a developer to enter into a legal agreement if we're recommending refusal, because it is an unnecessary expense. So we wouldn't have invited that in the circumstances, but it would be something that could either be presented at an appeal and then we would not defend that reason for refusal, or it could be something that if councillors felt that they wished to go against officer recommendation and approve the application, they could do it subject to that such legal agreement.
Okay, so making sure that if there is a proposal to grant approval, that condition is put in. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you. Not looking at this as a drive-through, but as a restaurant, as an employer of local people. I just wanted to ask whether McDonald's looked at other sites in Sandown, in Shanklin, nearby, to see whether there was any space to put a restaurant in those town centres. Looking at policy DM12, is it? I can't see, it's yellow. DM12, there is a huge emphasis on looking at retail being in town centres, located in town centres, where the people are, where people can walk to work. And I would like to know really what McDonald's have done to explore looking at some of the, because there are sites in our town centres, we can't deny that. But I'd like to know what McDonald's have done to look at those sites.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you. I'm going to, as you'd expect, answer that question in a roundabout way. And firstly, I think it's DM9, I think you're referring to, I think. But yes, there is an emphasis on town centres. The only caution I would advise is that when looking at sequential assessments, it is necessary for the authority and the developers themselves to be reasonable with being flexible, but they have to consider what the application seeks to provide. So if the application just sought to provide a restaurant, yes, there would be a requirement where they would have to demonstrate that there wasn't a restaurant or space where that restaurant could be provided. Because it incorporates a drive-through function as well, I would suggest from a planning officer perspective, we would consider it to be unreasonable to require them to separate those two uses, because you can't really have an isolated drive-through. It needs a restaurant associated with it. So we wouldn't expect them to disaggregate the restaurant from the drive-through element. And because the application seeks a restaurant and drive-through, that is what they would have to be sequentially assessing in regards to alternative sites. But that is what officers are saying simply hasn't been done, and there's a policy requirement that it is done. Thank you, Chairman.
Supplementary, Councillor Fuller. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of things. So should I do them in two questions? My
Please,
first one and
yeah,
then
I think that's,
supplementary afterwards.
yeah.
So I think the litter picking is great, but I am part of a group of Wombles on the Invictus Wombles, and we go litter picking all over the island and try to keep our beautiful countryside as clear as possible. We do find a lot of this branded takeaway packaging, and so I would dearly love to see that packaging more biodegradable and not in our countryside. If anyone can do anything with that with their business higher up. But I know that they said there was a certain perimeter they were going to litter pick. Can they do wider ones as well, and perhaps support? Can we put that into any agreement that they would do more litter picking? Because I find it miles and miles and miles away, and I think maybe education for some of the customers would be appreciated by some people who find the packaging in all sorts of places because they've decided to deposit it from their cars. So we find that drive-throughs aren't necessarily the most friendly thing for our countryside, because some customers don't appreciate it as much as many of us do. And so I don't know if there's anything we could ask that they could litter pick wider.
Thank you. I'll give Ms Wilkinson
Thank
a
you.
chance.
That was my first question. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms Wilkinson.
Yes, is probably the simple answer. I suppose we would have to consider what would be reasonable in terms of reasonably relatable to the development. And if it was, I would suggest that anything out, although I appreciate it's drive-through, anything outside walking distance may be not seen as being reasonable on the basis that, how far do you go, where the staff would have to travel in order to then litter pick. I think there was a comment about through the community events they organised litter picking. So there is the application was submitted by a kind of management plan that deals with litter picking and regularity of it. If members were minded to approve it, they could seek that to be altered in order to increase the distance. If you bear with me, I will find out what it is at the moment. And apologies, I don't know if that's off the top of my head. We could look at that, but it's a point which we'd have to decide what was a reasonable distance to extend it to. But if you want to ask your second question, I will look to see if I can find that distance.
Thank you. My second question was, I was one of only two councillors I think parked on the site on the day. I think myself and Councillor Price parked in there. Oh, did you park? I wasn't sure, Jeff, whether you walked down the road or not. So we parked in there, and obviously that was quite useful to know what it would be like leaving the site. And because I wanted to turn to Morrison's to do my weekly shop whilst I was there, and I couldn't get out for a very long time, and until someone let me out because there was no break in the traffic. And I know we've had a few people email us with details about, will there be a left turn advised or suggested or anything?
Well, I did.
So, yeah, well, I didn't because I wanted to see how long it would take. So, but will there be something to say left turn only? I don't know, because I could see there being an issue with people waiting and then the queue building up and then no one getting in and people getting very, very frustrated. And I hear from residents that that is already a big issue in that area. And obviously the KFC one already goes out onto the roundabout, so they don't have that issue. Morrison's goes out onto the roundabout, that doesn't have that issue. So they sort of, the cars are already sort of able to get out at certain times without having to wait. So just very, very aware that that could be a really negative impact for that area, and can see massive queues tailing back, which apparently there already is quite often. So I don't know how that is going to be achieved, that there could be a traffic flow.
Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Christensen. Ms Wilkinson, can you speak to that as a potential condition and the reasonableness of that, how it would interact with Island Roads? Thank you.
I can indeed, thank you, Chairman. I will turn to Island Roads and ask them to expand if necessary, but I think ultimately, obviously Island Roads comments is that the access would be acceptable as it stands. If councillors were minded to raise concerns over the exit of it in terms of traffic, yes, you could require a condition that requires that the signage be installed that restricts it to a left hand only, so they have to in essence use the roundabout to come out. That would, in essence, you wouldn't be able to condition that that is put in. You would simply be able to condition that a traffic regulation order was entered into in order to achieve a no left-hand turn. So that would be subject to an entirely separate process, and that would have to be an entirely independent process in terms of whether the acceptance of that traffic regulation order for no left turns and whether that was deemed reasonable by Island Roads. Obviously, you have got their comments on the application. They have said it's not necessary. But yes, the direct answer to this question is you could, if minded, require that a traffic regulation order was entered into to restrict the direction to which traffic can exit. Or the alternative is that, you know, certainly I know when I come out of certain exits and I'm not comfortable, I would just do that myself. So I suppose you could say it's up to the individual driver, but that's kind of, it's a difficult one. But yes, in theory, you could restrict it.
Thank you. Supplementary, Councillor Richardson.
So thanks. I just wouldn't want to leave it up to drivers to make that decision when they're, you know, it's a busy road. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of questions. I know in the past when I know particularly myself and Councillor Jones-Evans have spoken about rubbish in Newport and things like this, and it often is takeaway packaging, isn't it? We come across, and with all respect to McDonald's, they are very good at certainly picking it up around the town centre. But there was, I've heard in the past there was an option for drive-throughs to print reg numbers on packaging. Now, is that something that they could do without it being economically unviable? It's something that would certainly shame people into putting it in the bin, I'd like to think. Let's bear in mind, though, that probably the percentage of people that don't put their rubbish in a bin is very low. It's just unfortunately when they do it, they throw it out on the road and we all see it in the hedgerows and stuff, don't we? Is that something that we could request that they do? Is it something, could it be, if it's not done somewhere else, could it be another thing that the Isle of Wight starts off? You know, I don't know. Is that is it something we could condition, I guess? But I do have another question as well.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I'll cover that answer first. 150 metres is the current distance for the litter pick. So should members be minded that that isn't sufficient and wish to increase it, then that is currently 150 metres. Difficult one. I would say if McDonald's do not currently do that, it would be unreasonable to require them to invest in new software to allow them to do that. I would be concerned. I would say that steps beyond the reasonableness of a condition in terms of the proportionality. What we could do, if members were minded, is place an informative on any approval if members were minded to go against recommendation, so that they considered exploring it. But I think that's probably reasonably as far as we could go. But if members were minded and they wanted to, that's just my advice.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, the still on a question really, but the two biggest issues that I would have with this site was most certainly going to be the potential for litter and rubbish. But secondly, is the highways issue. And, you know, when it comes to the ride drive-through, we all know that there's times where you can't get enough vehicles on site and they're out into the main road, and then you've got a problem on the main road. Luckily, that road is wide enough in Ryde that people can pass. In Lake, it isn't wide enough. Now, the site itself will carry a lot more vehicles waiting, won't it? Probably, I mean, looking at the two sites, I've looked at aerial view of those two sites before tonight, and I would say it probably carries twice the amount of vehicles waiting to go into the drive-through. But the potential is that you could still have vehicles trying to get into the site, then causing another traffic jam to what's already a real carbuncle through Merry Gardens anyway. So would a solution be feasible for the committee to condition that perhaps there's yellow hatching in the road immediately outside the site, which would stop any waiting, but it would also potentially help a right turn out of the site as well?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thank you. I suppose any comments in regards to the yellow hatching would be exactly the same as the comments I made in terms of the left-hand turn lane. It would require a traffic regulation order for that to be done, and councillors would have to decide whether that was reasonably necessary, having regard to the comments that we currently have from Island Roads, that the access is acceptable. However, I would just draw members' attention to paragraph 7.70 of the report on page 133, which outlines that the site has capacity for 59 vehicles to stack. Or to be on site at any one time, and that stacking back in the public highway is unlikely. This is the comment from Island Roads. Although incidents could occur, and I think this is probably the key in the kind of breakdowns, collisions and vehicle manoeuvring. So, you know, if a vehicle breaks down at the hatch, what happens? Because then, yes, absolutely, you would start to get stacking back. It says, as the traffic generation associated with the proposal could have a negative impact on the operation of Newport Road and highway safety, that's Island Roads, recommend that a traffic management plan is secured by condition requiring the access to be temporarily closed when traffic queues extend into the public highway. So that's the approach Island Roads have taken. So rather than yellow hatching to stop people queuing, because you would only be able to do yellow hatching at the entrance, in essence, it wouldn't stop people stacking all the way back onto Newport Road. But actually, if there was an issue on site and cars were blocking the road, there would be a traffic management system in place that actually closed the access entrance off so that no more cars could drive into the site.
Thank you. Supplementary.
Do we know what that method would be? It wouldn't be just like 2 road cones or something. Would it be a barrier that can be closed or something, you know, that would demonstrate that it's closed and people have to drive by rather than stop and rubberneck looking into the site or whatever, you know? That's just going to make it worse. I'm just concerned because I think that part of Lake at times is really, really bad for traffic, and, you know, adding to that and not seeking an improvement via this would be bit of a lost opportunity in my view.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to follow up, please, on the section 106 or the absence of a section 106 agreement on biodiversity net gain. Would that be something, if we were minded to resolve in favour tonight, would that be a provision, could that be conditioned in such a way that that be entered into prior to a decision notice being issued? Or would it have to be part of a condition of the decision notice which the authority would then have to enforce?
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson.
It would have to be secured prior to the decision being issued. So it would be a resolution to grant subject to a 106 being secured. So we would have the 106 secured and then we would issue the decision. It would not be something we could condition.
Supplementary, Councillor Spink. No additional questions from colleagues. I feel that we sort of strayed into a blended debate stroke question section, but Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, just a minor thing. On the application, we have access to the rear, which is attached to this particular application. First of all, that seems unusual. Is there any guidance on how that impacts on the overall planning application?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson.
Thanks, Chairman. In essence, the application just provides access. I would say it's not unusual if you've got a parcel of land to the rear of a site which doesn't form part of the application, because it ensures in essence that you don't landlock that site and sterilise it for anything. So I wouldn't say that the proposal to incorporate a secondary access is unusual. What I would say is that at the moment, the land to the rear has no planning use. And if I just pull up, if you bear with me one moment, I will pull up that red and blue line plan again. And you'll see that the red line only goes to this point. That is as far as the access road would go. So if I go to the layout plans, you can see that it stops there. So at the moment, it can't physically go into that land to the rear. So any use of the land to the rear would be subject to a separate planning application to actually complete the road, I would suggest, and access and provide a use to the land at the rear, because it stops there, it terminates there. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Supplementary, no. Any additional questions from colleagues? I think my only question was in relation to the MPPF at paragraph 97 and the weight that we should place on should as opposed to must in relation to refuse. The reason I raise it simply is that I have a slight concern that were a third party to wish to object to a potential approval of this against officer recommendations, that would be a route of JR, which would obviously sound in costs to the council. So I simply raise that as a point, not wishing to direct the debate too much. I don't know, Mr. Guard, would you be able to speak to that?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. So the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 guides us on this in terms of the legal position. It says that decision makers must make decisions in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. You must have regard as a decision maker to all of the material planning considerations, and that includes the MPPF. At paragraph 7.3 of your reports that you got before you today at page 122, you've got the relevant piece of the MPPF, which is quoted by officers in the report there. It says local planning authorities should refuse, this is emphasis added, applications for hot food takeaways and fast food outlets within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate unless the location is within a designated town centre, or B, in locations where there is evidence that a concentration of such uses is having an adverse impact on local health, pollution or antisocial behaviour. The weight, Chairman, to be attached to that point as a material plan consideration is entirely a matter for the decision maker. So decision makers today could attach greater weight to the economic benefits, for example, of the scheme over and above the MPPF, and the MPPF is not written in such a way that would prevent planning permission from being granted, but you must have regard to that provision in making your decision. That's what I've got. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guard. Thank you. We'll move then to the debate section of this application. If there's anyone who wishes to commence, Councillor Quirk, I think you got there very slightly first, then Councillor Pride.
Locally, this has had more responses than any planning application I've known since I've been a councillor, and I suspect the number of comments that have come through to all councillors on the committee, you'd have picked that up. But being a local councillor, I've got that in trumps. So and not a single objection. Everyone is supportive, and it actually supports several of our other policies. We want to discourage people from using their cars. Well, at present, if you bribe the kids with saying, if you do this, I'll take you to McDonald's later, you don't have to go all the way to Ryde to take them to McDonald's. You can actually walk down the road to take them to McDonald's. So it actually sort of ties into our sort of travel plans. We've just approved a Bay plan, a regeneration plan, about getting jobs into the Bay. Most of the jobs in the Bay are tourism related, and they're seasonal. Actually, jobs that are there all year round are really, really important. And as tourism has declined, certainly has shifted, because it's shifted away from the traditional B&Bs. We need jobs in the Bay, and this provides a good set of jobs with opportunities for kids to learn and get some qualifications. I think it is totally in line with the aspirations of the Bay Regeneration Plan. It's in line with the aspirations of certainly of Lake and Shanklin councils. I suspect of Sandown as well, but I can't speak for them. But I think this is, we need to put a high level of weighting on the economic regeneration, about the regeneration of that central area of Lake, because of what you've got is a well-developed area now, apart from a really scruffy little bit in the middle of it that currently serves really greasy spoon burgers rather than actually quite decent quality burgers. So I'm going to support this. I move that we accept it, and I will look for someone to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Would you be wishing to attach any conditions to an approval?
Get to conditions, but I think we need to. We can discuss. We're going to get into discussion, but let's have a positive motion to discuss. So I'm moving that we move to approve it and then discuss what the conditions are. Yeah, I think we do need to have several conditions, but let's.
Seconder, Councillor Brodie. We'll continue to debate. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, let's face it, if this was a McDonald's restaurant that was potentially going into Sandown High Street, it would be brilliant for the town. But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at a drive-through. You know, or the amount of contact I've had from members of the public, and I've been watching comments on Facebook. There's really nothing but positive comments for it, I've got to say. So it would be really hard for me to find anything other than, you know, should we be voting for another fast food outlet? But, you know, no one's saying they don't want it, to be quite honest with you. So I think it would be silly for me to say I was going to vote against this, because even though I don't really like going against officers' recommendations, but I think we can probably turn some of those reasons round amongst the debate. Certainly the biodiversity net gain one is one that we can probably tick straight away. But when you hear what Steve's just said about 260 employees, and a lot of those are young people, very young people, aren't they? And this is going to be another 120. That could be 60 people under 18 working in starting their working career off in McDonald's, and no doubt at all it will probably lead on to other jobs as well. And McDonald's actually do pay quite good wages, and they do look after their staff. You know, they have lots of incentives within their business where they can seek promotion and be recognised for good work. The location or the existing site, I mean, at the moment it's a proper mess. You know, you've got a burger van, you've got a row of, you know, used cars of some description, and I'm being kind there. And then you've got a car wash, which actually was already causing a queue. It certainly stopped me getting out of the site to start with. It's just a real mess there. I think, you know, to say this isn't going to improve the local area would be stupid, because it's going to massively improve it. And McDonald's do look after their premises. Their premises are always clean, they're always smart. you know, they do make sure that their premises are maintained. So I will certainly support this application, and be interested to see what other people come up in the debate. But I do wonder if there, I know we've been told that we couldn't push for something outside the site like yellow hatching, but I wonder if we could. And whether we could include that in the approval. Obviously, I wouldn't want to hamstring this development by then waiting 6 months for a traffic regulation order, because that would really probably mess it up. But it is something that we could perhaps, you know, ask them to explore in some kind of condition. Is there anything you know, officers could help me with on that when it comes to building a resolution? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Officers have been conferring in relation to forming those sort of conditions, which would be the distillation of the debate so far. I'll invite Ms Wilkinson to speak to that.
Thank you, Chairman. Just very briefly, I want to firstly advise some caution, and then I'll talk about the condition in terms of the yellow hatching. I would just highlight to councillors in terms of what weight you deem to give to the current condition of the site. I can't tell you what weight to give to it. You must give that to yourself. However, it is all unauthorised, and we have issued an enforcement notice for all uses to cease on site, all operations to cease on site. That is the correct process by which to regularise unlawful development of land. So I would advise that limited weight is given to the unauthorised development on the existing site. I can't tell you what weight to give to it, but I would advise limited based on the fact that we are formally undertaking enforcement action to stop those uses operating. That's my caution in terms of that. In terms of the yellow hatching, there is no way to achieve yellow hatching on the highway without a traffic regulation order. They would have to apply for one. So a condition could only require them to enter into a traffic regulation order to achieve one. That is an entirely separate application process that could take a significant period of time. That is my other advice.
Thank you, Ms Wilkinson. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I echo what everybody has said about the economic benefits of a company which is very well run and basically well received. We will have different opinions, many of us, about, you know, going there and various other aspects of what they provide. And I have to say that several miles from any McDonald's, I pick it up litter from there regularly. However, that is one of an issue which you face with all takeaways. And in terms of what we've seen over the last few years, certainly McDonald's have a very good reputation and a well-deserved reputation. Secondly, in terms of, we are looking at an area in Lake which is a relatively low wage area, and this will provide solid wages to people who are fairly young over a sustained period during the year. I have personal opinions about the problems with tourism industry and the very intermittent nature of wages. Thirdly, I think Sarah has raised this, the current biodiversity of that particular area is minimal. The biodiversity net gain is going to be very substantial. Virtually whatever you do, you could plant one tree and it probably double it immediately. But that doesn't always mean that that should be the starting point. So we have to be cautious about biodiversity net gain. But fundamentally, I have to agree with what everybody's saying, or most people are saying. This will give employment. This seems an appropriate place to put it. And if we actually go back to local planning authorities should refuse, it says within walking distance of schools. Broadly, we've already talked about, and I don't see that they would be walking that distance, where children and young people congregate. I don't think any of them really would be congregating in that particular area. So I don't think that that is a particularly major thing for us to overcome as a committee. I'll leave it there. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm mindful of the fact we're getting towards our time limit, so I will propose a slight continuance until, say, 7:30, just to give us the time. Hopefully we'll be concluding before that. All in favour of a continuance? Against, that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Andre.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to say that I do know this area very, very well, both as a driver and as a pedestrian. I regularly walk from my house across the pathway that was referred to, I think, as the Flint, which goes along the rear of Broadley School. And I come out at when I sometimes actually walk to the supermarket. So I do know the area really well. I really have struggled with this one, and I've found it very, very challenging what to give the most weight to. I will not abstain on principle, so I will be making a decision one way or the other, but this is my thinking. So paragraph 7.8 gives some of the statistics from the council's public health officer. And I would just like to highlight that when I was cabinet member for public health, the annual report of the Director for Public Health was actually on childhood obesity. And the figures that are given in the report do actually concur with that annual report. Just a couple of things to highlight: that childhood overweight and obesity at reception might be expected to rise to almost 35% by 2040, with the rate among Year 6 pupils expected to rise to 32.4%, with the caveat that several studies show that these figures were calculated prior to the COVID-19 pandemic and are likely to be even higher. And I think if we are honest with ourselves, people don't go to McDonald's, I apologise, but people don't go to McDonald's for healthy food in that sense. I am a pescatarian, so I eat fish, I don't eat meat, and it's much, much more expensive for vegetarian food at McDonald's than it is for the what I would consider to be more unhealthy usual burgers. However, like Councillor Price, I was actually very impressed with Mr. Smith's account of all the benefits that I think perhaps are not necessarily so widely known or associated. Again, how much weight do we put to that site? Personally, I think I actually do put quite a lot of weight on the detriment to the local area of that current site. It is basically a mess. It doesn't. So Morrisons have invested quite heavily. They've improved and enlarged and smartened up their supermarket. We've got a relatively brand new Aldi. We've got the Merry Gardens have invested, and you've got this bit in between that really does need a lot doing to it. The traffic issues, I would not be recommending for a TRO for Hatching, because I think all that would do would just shunt the traffic further down. I don't think it would do anything to help the traffic. I do wonder though, in terms of a left-hand turn only, whether there is actually a need for a separate TRO, because I think that would be down to the individual. If people deem it safe and there's the opportunity to turn right, if they think they're going to be sitting there for a long time, there is a very accessible route to turn left, to go around the roundabout, to go the other way. I think also I would put quite a lot of weight onto the economic and the workplace benefits. It's true to say, and I think officers are absolutely right to look at the whole Bay Area, because the draw for such an anchor institution like McDonald's is certainly going to be at least from the Bay, not only for people actually accessing the restaurant, but for gaining employment as well. And we've brought a lot of local cycling infrastructure walking plans that we're developing across the island. And I think this would actually fit with that. As I say, I mean, I do actually, there are footpaths and there are sort of safe areas around. So I think on balance, the weight that I would give to it, I am minded to go against the officer's recommendation and to recommend approval with the condition for the bionet diversity gain.
Thank you,
Chair.
Councillor Andre. Councillor Critchison.
Thank you. So I think it's agreed that we're going to put in the legal agreement about the biodiversity net gain. And so if we wanted a suggested left turn and go to the roundabout, because I'm loath to just rely on common sense when people are at junctions. So does that need a TRO for the applicant to put up a sign at their entrance to say suggest left turn?
Thank you. Ms Wilkinson, are you able to address that point?
I can address that point. I have a hovering legal advisor, which may mean that he wants to come in and correct anything I may say. But in essence, from my position, a sign on site that simply says, we suggest you turn left would not require a traffic regulation order. To what extent that would be, we would, I suppose we have 3 signage applications in with them at the moment. How we would manage, I would suggest that potentially it could be a condition that we would require an approval of a sign that is a advisory for a left-hand turn only. So in theory, yes, and it wouldn't require, as long as all the requirements were on site, it wouldn't require a traffic regulation order, but it would have no legal basis whatsoever.
Thank you, Councillor Critchison.
Sorry, yeah, it's just to with that, just to say that it's a suggested thing. It is not a legal requirement that if people want to turn right and wait there, but I think if it's made clear to people that they can turn left, I think that would help. That's the concerns people have come to me with, that it's that turning there and the build up of traffic. So, and with the litter picking, I don't think we can extend what they've done, but I would like to speak to people about maybe doing some community things. And I don't think we need to put that in the legal agreement. But with that left turn thing, also, I don't know what to put in there, but maybe it can be monitored to see what traffic levels happen. I don't know how that can be written in there.
What we'll propose, I think, is that officers spend a little bit of time thinking about what conditions, distilling down what they've heard.
6 months
tonight.
after it's open and things are chaos and we're getting lots of people say something, maybe that, I don't know how we would address that at that stage. Thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Just for information, there is a sign in the Spithead Park as you come out, which says you shouldn't be turning right, turn left, and no one abides by that whatsoever. So,
thank you. Yes, yeah. The never underestimate the degree that island drivers can be bloody-minded sometimes. Councillor Fuller.
It's a difficult one, this one. Really, really difficult. There is no doubt that McDonald's is a fantastic employer. They provide a whole array of jobs to younger people who go on to do themselves proud. I think that the reputation of McDonald's locally is very good. What they've done in Newport is very, very good. However, from my point of view, I do have policy concerns with respect to this. I would be much happier if they had looked at alternative locations in our town centres. That's where people, after all, live. That's where it's easy to get to work. It's where people can go to work, come back home, get something to eat. It's that location. I think the issue that I have with this location is it isn't very well served by public transport. I think there is one bus an hour that goes out to this location during the winter, which isn't great. If you've got a workforce trying to get to this location, that does not fill me with very much confidence, and that is contrary to policy SP7 of the core strategy. I also have concerns that it isn't a town centre location, and perhaps it is locking the gate after the horses run off years ago. But I still feel very, very concerned that we are pulling the life and soul out of our town centres. And this is another opportunity where another of the bay towns are going to lose the opportunity to have a restaurant located in the centre of those towns that need the support. You know, we are investing quite a lot of money in places like Sandown, in Shanklin, to regenerate those towns. And it's quite sad to see that McDonald's, as far as I am aware, have not looked at perhaps investing their money in those towns. You know, I think the newest NPPF from December 2024 does say local planning authorities should refuse applications for hot food takeaways and fast food outlets within walking distance of schools and other places where children and young people congregate, unless the location is within a designated town centre. This is not a designated town centre. So again, I think on balance, I will have to support the refusal of this application. I know that what I have said probably builds upon what officers are suggesting, but I do not feel that this is the kind of application, even though a precedent has been set, but I don't think it's an application that I am willing to support.
Thank you, Councillor Fuller. I'm conscious of time. I'm going to invite officers to distill down what they've taken from this into some conditions. So I'm going to suggest, say, we return at 10 minutes past 7, just to give officers some time, given that this is against officer recommendation, if we are minded to follow the motion that's been proposed. So at 10 past, thank you. It's now 10 past. If I could call us back to order. I'm going to invite Mr. Bolter to speak on some of the conditions that officers have put forward or are going to put forward.
Thank you, Chair. So if I may, a little wider than perhaps you just indicated there. But so from what officers have heard in the debate and from the questions that council has posed, I would summarise the following. That the committee has given greater weight to the economic regeneration of the bay and the economic benefits to the local area in the balancing of the application, and as such have arrived at a different conclusion than officers. Councillors are satisfied that the submitted sequential test is acceptable when applying local knowledge of the operation of the local town centres and employment areas. Councillors consider that the concerns regarding archaeology can satisfactorily be addressed through conditions, and the BNG uplift can be secured through a legal agreement. As such, Planning Committee is minded to grant Planning Permission subject to a legal agreement being secured and appropriate conditions to secure, amongst other things, an archaeology assessment prior to the commencement of the development. So this is a bit of a two-part sort of conversation here, councillors. That's the overarching view, and I'm now going to pass over to Sarah to then pick up on a bit more detail about what those potential conditions could look like.
Thank you. I'm going to run through a list of things that I think that we probably need to, that I would advise councillors that they control by way of conditions. So first two are absolutely standard: a time limit for commencement for 3 years and the approved plans that must be undertaken in accordance with the approved plans. I would then propose we put forward the conditions as recommended by Island Roads within their comment, which covers such things as a construction managed plan, the access, the construction details, and the delivery of the requirement for the protection of the sight lines for that access. They also recommend a parking and access management plan. I'd propose to extend that slightly and require a traffic management plan and parking and traffic management plan to include an advisory left turn. If desired. If not, then I don't need, then that's just there. Also, conditions recommended by Environmental Health within their comment to cover hours of delivery, hours of operation, as well as contamination. I'd also recommend that we look at adding conditions with regards to lighting to protect the neighbouring property, noise attenuation in terms of any barriers, and odour control. I would then suggest we look at two conditions with regards to archaeology, as stated by Mr. Bolter, in relation to not only an assessment prior to commencement, but then the ability for an archaeologist to actually access the site during that work to monitor it, which is the standard archaeological conditions we use. A construction environmental management plan to deal with the environmental issues, as well as a requirement that the development's undertaken in accordance with the submitted preliminary ecological appraisal, landscaping and ecological implications, and biodiversity management plan, as well as conditions to require details of security as recommended by the Crime Prevention Design Advisor. Finally, in terms of the litter picking or any kind of litter control, I should probably say, in terms of any plan, there isn't the current document in relation to the existing 150 metre. The thing they would normally do is part of the submitted planning statement. I wouldn't recommend that we condition that they must adhere to the submitted planning statement because it's supporting information rather than a specific document. Therefore, I would suggest we look at a condition that in essence requires, before the driveway is brought into use, a litter control plan to be submitted, which would detail how the premises will be responsible for litter collection outside the confines of the site. Councillor Brodie may be aware that is a condition we've placed on McDonald's in Newport, the drive-through in Newport. So I would suggest a very similar condition should be placed on here. And that, I think, covers my list.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter.
Thank you, Chair. So further to that was obviously a sort of headline of potential conditions there. That's not the detailed condition. So I would suggest that further to any resolution, you may wish to then consider delegating to officers the specific wording of such conditions that we've just outlined as those sort of heads of terms, as it were, to then enable officers to implement the committee's resolution, if that indeed is what the resolution is. I think as officers, we would also want to highlight, I suppose, and just make sure you are fully aware of the potential risks of applying the sequential test in such a manner, and that there is no condition that can be applied to mitigate for the lack of an air quality impact assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bolter. I've been perhaps optimistic in thinking we'd be able to conclude by past, so I think we are going to have to push this